Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our December 9th meeting. I'm going to like to call the meeting to order. And let's see here. Before we call to order, just to give everybody a heads up, we did have a nice reception honoring Mrs. Amy Powers, who resigned November 22nd, and Dr. Brian Luke, who will be stepping down December 31st, and our newest board member, Mr. Jermaine Ferguson, just took the oath of office a few minutes ago. So thank you, Amy and Brian, and welcome, Jermaine. And now, if we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Ferguson?
Present.
Mr. Luke?
Here.
Ms. Savage?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Devine?
Here. And now if you could stand up and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would now accept a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Ms. Savage. Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next on our agenda, I would accept a motion to approve Tammy Ryan and Lynn Hamm as classified employees of the month for November 2021.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second.
second by Mr. Smith. No, go ahead. I don't know if they're here.
I am not sure that we saw them, so I will go ahead and read. I guess I could have done that from my seat, couldn't I? Lynn Hamm and Tammy Ryan actually are combined on their entry, so I'll read what their peers had to say about them. Lynn and Tammy are constantly willing to help our students all day, every day. They are always going from classroom to classroom or even the library or study hall to help students pass their classes when they are struggling. They never complain and work tirelessly year-round. They do recycling every single week, and they are here before 7 a.m. Both have an advisory group, even though they're not teachers, and they both go above and beyond for their kids in this building. So I want to thank Lynn and Tammy for everything they do for the students at the high school.
Yes, and if we could have the roll call, we'll make it official.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carried. And how about another round of applause? Since there's two of them anyways, right? All right, next on our agenda, we're going to have a presentation on enrollment and facilities.
All right, so if we could go back to the first slide. Thank you so much. Good evening. This is a presentation on the enrollment study that we just recently completed. We teamed up with FutureThink. FutureThink is an organization, business that works with school districts from all over the country, right here in the state of Ohio and Central Ohio as well, in regards to enrollment projections, redistricting, a variety of school functions. So, a very good firm there. Next slide, please. So you can't drive around Marysville schools and not see construction, apartments, houses, a lot of things going on around town for sure. Next slide. And as you can see, there is the existing development that's occurring up in the upper left-hand corner. And then the bottom part of this slide shows some of those potential developments that could be coming our way as well. Also, too, when we look at the number of building permits in our school district, You know, they were moving up, they went back down, but now we're back up on that upward trend again. And again, these are single-family dwellings, just permits that will available to the organization completing this projection. Next slide. Also, too, when you look at some demographics of our school district with household income, you're definitely in a 5-year projection. We're projected to see an increase in our community, average family size maintaining over the next 5 years, and total family households growing. So when you hear all of this, you probably would think, wow, schools are overcrowded now, and I bet in the future all of them are going to be packed full. So next slide. But when we got the results of the enrollment projections, we were a little bit surprised. And when you think about Ohio birth counts, are definitely on a downward trend, as you can see by the data shown. When we look at the zip codes with Marysville schools, that's the orange line, we're staying pretty consistent with live birth counts. And it's hovering around the 400 to 500, kind of an up and down pattern and trend to that as well. So staying relatively consistent within our school district. Also, too, proactively, we did an enrollment study several years ago. And what we have found is, based on those projections, we actually were approximately 117 students short of what was projected for this school year. This is just a quick shot of our historical enrollment data. As you can see, back in 12-13, we were up to 5275. And then we went back down, then we started to trend up, back down. We were always hovering around that 5,200. And then, and of course, this school year, we're at the 5,368. And then our projected enrollment conducted by the study with Future Think. As you can see to the far left there, there's our actual enrollment information. And then it's projected out for the next 10 years. Just a reminder, though, the further you go out in any projection study, the less trusting the data you can have of it. It's you know, with any projection, the further you go out. So as you can see, there appears to be some steady growth occurring over the next 10 years. And just to take a more detailed look at that, let's pull up the next slide, please. What does that really mean? Well, you can see the difference there. You know, it's, you know, from this year to next year, we're projected to gain approximately 121 students. From 22-23, approximately 69 students, etc. It's always hovering around just around that 2% growth each year that's being projected out. Now, when you think about capacity for buildings, it's important to note up at the top there that building capacity is based on educational programming and services. It can go up or down based on building activities and student needs. So how this was designed by Future Think is they are showing the actual enrollment and then what's projected 5 years and then 10 years down the road. And it also shows our actual enrollment as well, along with the capacity of each building. So when you look at this, things stand out right away. Edgewood and Mill Valley stand out, especially in the 5-year projection, to where there's definitely going to be need. And we'll get into more of those details here in a little bit. And then, too, as you look 10 years out, there's that need remaining there based on the projections. Naven, we're looking pretty good. We're looking really good, actually. Northwood, with the projections, we're looking good through the 10 years. Getting a little tight there towards the end. Raymond, we're looking good. Creekview, it's getting tight towards the end. Something interesting with Creekview, though, is actually 6 years into the projections, it appears that we meet that capacity threshold. But then what's interesting is as you go out the next 2 years, the enrollment goes down. And then it goes back up and it goes down again. So it's an interesting pattern that we need to keep an eye on. And then again, Bunsold Middle School, 10 years out, they're definitely, an area that we need to continue to monitor. But something else to mention about Bunsold Middle School is really at about year 7 in the projection is when it becomes more of a concern. And then with our high schools, our high schools, we have plenty of room through the 10-year projection, especially with the STEM school and high school together. Next slide, please. So a lot goes into this. And one thing that we looked at was potential available space, especially in our K-4 buildings. When you think of an intermediate school or a middle school or high school, there's a variety of things that you can do more with scheduling, educational offerings, programs, et cetera, to get creative with space and student capacity. But at the elementaries, there's not that much flexibility. So available space is one thing that we looked at. And Edgewood right now, really 0 rooms available. They've already started to condense. I mean, we already have OT happening on a stage at the school. So it's already tight. Mill Valley Elementary, we have the potential for 1 available room at this time. Naven, we have room. We have 5 available rooms. And that's a good thing. Because Naven Elementary has the potential to be an overflow school for us if we ever have that need in our school district. Northwood Elementary, 3 schools, rooms, and then Raymond 3 as well. Next slide. So next steps. We need to keep a close eye on Bunsold Middle School and Creekview Intermediate. And the reasons that we need to keep a close eye I mentioned before, with the year 6 and the year 7. We definitely need to keep a close eye on them. See what happens with the enrollment projections year to year and how close are we staying on those projected numbers. And again, Northwood, even though we're looking good through the 10 years, it was getting pretty tight there towards the end. So we're going to want to monitor that enrollment projection data very closely each and every year to see if we're on track with that. An area of immediate concern is Mill Valley Elementary, of course. That was clear with the capacity slide. Some solutions, though, to create some more space, though, that we can do immediately is next year what we plan on doing is the district's alternative kindergarten program. Instead of it being housed at Mill Valley Elementary next year, it's going to be moved to Naven Elementary. Again, Naven has more space available. By moving this program to Naven, it frees up an additional space for Mill Valley as well. Also, too, we're going to remove some furniture and equipment that's currently being stored in a classroom. And then the potential for a redistricting study in 23-24 with the possible implementation of a 24-25 school year. Because again, this puts us out to where with our last redistricting, a child won't be impacted twice by a redistricting. So if we don't redistrict until 24-25, that protects those students from being impacted twice possibly. The other area of immediate concern was definitely Edgewood. And what's interesting about Edgewood is that, for instance, this school year, Edgewood has 5 kindergarten classrooms. Well, what's your point? Well, my point is, next year they're going to be in 1st grade. Those 5 classrooms are going to be in 2nd grade then, 2 years out. Those 5 are going to be in 3rd, then in 4th. And then with the continued enrollment coming in, it becomes just a availability of classroom issue with sections of classrooms. And what's interesting about Edgewood too is it's an older building and the classrooms, not all the classrooms are compatible to have a class necessarily in it. It can be used for other reasons, but not in a typical classroom. They're smaller, etc. There's just no extra space at Edgewood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Walker, our Director of Operations, and he's going to start talking about solutions for Edgewood.
Did we want to open this up for any? Oh, well, we'll do the questions later, because Jonathan's going to be.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so as Jonathan said, the information in the enrollment study shows us that we need space. Some of the good news that would come out of that is we don't necessarily, at the moment, need a new building. We looked at several options to address the issues that Jonathan just shared. We landed on using our current assets as opposed to a new build or even modulars. Modulars would simply cost too much initially for the amount of space that we are looking to use, but really what ultimately complicates that is we don't own those. That would be a lease term, and so obviously when that lease term is up, those materials no longer belong to us. And it obviously would be a revolving cost as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we looked at our current assets, and that leads us to our current administration building, 1000 Edgewood Drive, as it relates to what the immediate need is, as Jonathan noted. What we can do with Edgewood is repurpose that building and add 5 additional classrooms. This would eliminate the need for modular units at Edgewood. Our construction commencement would be December of 2022, with students occupying the space the following school year of the fall of 23. Todd will get into some building costs later, but I just want to quickly note, I had given a presentation a while ago that talked about potentially turning East Elementary back into an elementary school building that we would occupy with kids. If you remember, that cost was around $14 million to do that, so it exceeded the 2/3 threshold that would make sense to repurpose that building. So basically we kind of took that off the table to repopulate with kids. However, that building still remained online as a potential solution to other issues, and that's how it fits in here. So obviously if we were to renovate the Edgewood building, we would have to move our administration offices. So if you want to move on to the next slide, we'll just take a quick look at what that renovation would look like at 1000 Edgewood Drive. It gives us 5 classrooms. Actually, these are very good sized classrooms for, particularly for what they have at Edgewood. Would provide some flexibility for them as far as scheduling. It also updates the bathrooms and also provides an updated HVAC system. So then the question becomes, of course, like I said, what about the administration offices? With the use of East Elementary, we can not only house our administrative offices, but we can also create a new district welcome center to better our enrollment and student services process. We can create more meeting space, more storage space, teacher collaborative workspace, and this move will secure a home for Tri Academy and give it room to expand. We also have the opportunity to give IT much needed workshop and storage space. We will be able to establish permanent board meetings there as well. This is actually quite a significant gain for us as the demands on the IT department have continued to increase over time. They've also increased with obviously the sophistication of the operation of the board meetings, and as those meetings have moved around, it's been quite a heavy lift for those folks, and this would give them an opportunity to manage that in a much more efficient manner. One last note on IT is that the 212 Chestnut building is also already wired to our cog fiber network. So that's a significant cost savings, as if we were to go out, if we were to use a building we weren't already connected to, we could be talking potentially 6 figures to incorporate any new build or any new building that we would occupy into that cog network and that cog fiber system. So it's just another advantage of using the current asset. So the timeline for this, it's just kind of obviously it's as we would move out of one building, we'd move into the other. So the construction commencement for this one would be August 22nd, or 2022, so that's this year. And we would be occupying that building about this time next year. So we would be able to vacate the building to open it up for construction to get that done in time for the kids to occupy that building in the fall of 2023 school year. So. You have any questions? Oh, sorry. And if we see the slide here, it gives a little bit of a layout of the footprint that we would be occupying. Sort of the front left of the slide there would be administrative offices. The current auditorium would be still uses auditorium space, but board meeting space. We would have the storage spaces to the left of the slide there, and then of course a Tri-Academy. And just to the top of Tri-Academy would be the area where they would have the ability to expand their programming or add needed space. If you haven't been in that building or in that area, Scott could attest to this, there's just not a lot of room to move. He doesn't have a lot of room to move literally, physically, in that office space that he occupies. And of course, we also would gain the use of a gymnasium, which we could certainly use in this district a little bit more gymnasium space. So quite a few advantages to repurposing that building, aside from simply moving our administrative offices in there.
It's time for questions? Okay.
Well, we'll move on to Todd as well, but
Okay.
I didn't know if there were anything specific here just because of my time constraints, so.
Okay, so related to you, the cost of the modules and what space is created if we would use modules instead of a renovation of the board office?
So the modulars would be before you considered energizing the buildings or hooking them up to sewer service and things like that. For the size of space that we're looking at, it's a little over $1 million for the 4-year term.
Is that per modular or?
Well, that's for the space that we would
Okay.
use them for. So that's roughly 8,000 square feet that we'd be for that cost.
Okay, and then have the cost for the renovations, that's that 2 million?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking? 2 million?
Yeah, and so that includes the contingency as well. So the cost could be less than that, but that's building in a bit of a hedge in case the construction costs float a little bit.
And have we considered any type of covering to connect the two buildings or?
Yeah, we've talked about that. If you want to go back to the slide of probably won't really be able to see it that well. You can kind of make out a green line on there. So if you, actually where that doorway is right now is my office, so my office would become a doorway. And that actually lines up right with the sidewalk that comes out of the back door at Edgewood. So the talk has been to possibly have a cover there. I think what we're thinking of doing is looking at that outside the scope of this project, just to determine really what the best way to do that might be. Also to potentially price it outside of this project. And then the backside of that parking lot, we have discussed repurposing that into, say, playground space for Edgewood in that building. Obviously, we would want to secure that parking lot for those kiddos that might have to utilize that path to get back and forth between the buildings.
And did we have some specific use plan for the gym space at the east location?
At the moment, I would just call that undefined.
Okay.
Going back to those modulars a little bit, you said that they're about 1,000 square feet total space for the modulars?
Well, what I
or-
said is
Yeah.
if you, to get that sort of equivalent square foot, we would need multiple units.
Yeah, yep.
So just consider a classroom. So
Right.
at about 8,000-ish square feet, we would be
Gotcha.
looking at about 1.1 million. And
Gotcha.
then, well, it'd be a little less than that, but that's without consideration to energize or
Right.
or walkways and egress, things like that. So there would obviously be a greater expense that would come to that, and that cost would recur at the end of that term.
Right,
So,
right. And we wouldn't own anything at the end.
correct.
Right,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay, we ready? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the financial impact. As Ryan kind of alluded to, before we did this enrollment study, I think we were fully prepared and expecting to have to build a new building. And I think that was the same thing that a lot of the people in the community were thinking. We saw that in some of our focus groups that we met with, that was kind of a theme that people were thinking. So that was some of the good news that we got out of this data, that we shouldn't have to build a new building as soon as we were thinking we would. When you're looking to build a new building, there's two types of levies that you have to pass. First would be a bond issue, and so that bond issue is for the actual construction of the building. And that's actually usually, from a levy standpoint, that's actually the smaller of the two levies. The other levy that is needed is an operating levy. So that's for the staffing, the utilities, supplies, those kinds of things that are an annual ongoing expense of a new building. So because of the large impact of two levies and what the impact that has on our taxpayers, building a new building is something you don't want to do until you absolutely have to do. The good news with what we're looking at doing here with this project is that we're able to pay for that using our permanent improvement fund, which means we can do this project without asking for a tax increase. And this also helps us to meet our long-term plan that we've talked about for the last several years. And just to reiterate that, the bonds that we currently have on our books for the buildings that were built over the last however many years, those will expire in 2029. So at that time, currently that's about 6.5 mils, probably be a little less by the time it actually expires. So at that time, we would be able to ask our taxpayers, instead of letting this 6 mils expire, let us keep that millage and apply it towards building a new building and possibly all, if not some, of the operating costs of that new building in what would technically be called a no new millage levy. So that's our plan and our goal to get out to that point. Next slide. Not to be outdone by Jonathan, I too have a picture of a baby. Next slide. So to look at the future levy impact, and I'm going to be discussing a little more in detail the upcoming levy in a next presentation. So we're looking at most likely an 8 mil levy in 2023. And I use kind of round numbers here. I just went 888 just to make things simple. But something to keep in mind with that levy, the upcoming levy, is a lot of that revenue is actually going to be replacing revenue that we're currently losing. So even though it's a new tax to our community and to our taxpayers, from a revenue standpoint to the district, a lot of that is going to be just replacing money that we're losing from the the tangible personal property reimbursement that we get from the state. Because of that, we're likely to need another new money levy, let's just say 2027. Obviously, that's out there far enough that, you know, I'm just making projections. Things could change, such as maybe our state revenue goes up, which it's actually been going the wrong direction, but you never know. So, you know, and especially with the enrollment growth that we're seeing, the extreme inflationary growth we're seeing, it's pretty likely we would need another levy in that 4-year range, give or take. So the idea of building a new building on top of that, that would be an additional possible 8 mils. Now, that would depend on what type of building we would be looking at. If it's an elementary building, that would be most likely below 8 mils. If it's a middle school, that 8 mil mark is probably about right. Just looking at the cost of those 3 levies in a 4 to 5 year period on an individual taxpayer that owns a $250,000 house would be $2,100 per year. Or if you just want to break it out by levy, if it were 8 mils a piece, that'd be $700 per levy. hold on one sec, make sure I hit everything on this slide.
Todd,
go ahead.
excuse me, Todd.
Yes.
About how much money from TPP do we lose on an annual basis?
So when we started receiving the reimbursement originally, we were getting about $5.65 million. Right now, we're losing about $600,000 per year, and we'll, I think around 2026 is when we're going to be fully wiped out, and we'll be getting zero at that point.
Do you mind for the broader audience just to explain TPP just in a very
10
quick
words or less.
Reader's Digest version?
So the TPP, the tangible personal property, is something, you know, has been talked a lot about here for years, but we kind of got away from talking about it as much because it was kind of a dead issue. But that was a tax that was on the, basically like the inventory of companies. So for instance, like Honda or Scott's, the inventory that they had in their warehouses, they would have paid tax on that. The state felt like it would be more business friendly to get rid of that tax. So when they did, that was about $9 million of revenue that just immediately would have went off of our books. Because of that, and because us and several other schools would be super highly impacted by that, such as Worthington, schools such as us were given a reimbursement to kind of ease us away from that. So I think that answers that. So, okay. Next slide, please. So what we really need to look at to reach that plan of getting to 2029 without building a new building is flexibility. You know, we've already decided, you know, looking at that enrollment growth, that so doing nothing is not an option. You know, we do have growth, we do have immediate needs with some classroom space, so doing nothing and spending nothing is not an option. So taking that into account, we looked at the idea of building a new building, and that's not something that we want to do based on those levy scenarios. So we looked at, you know, well, what options do we have, which is where we got here with this current plan. The good news for our taxpayers and for the district from a long-term perspective is we don't need a high school. That's the most expensive building we could build. That would probably cost anywhere from $60 to $70 million, not even counting the operating costs. So that was covered by the Straight A grant in 2014. We received $14 million and renovated the early college high school. So because of that, we're really, you know, it was such a great benefit educationally as an immediate impact, but from a long-term standpoint, it's really a great benefit to our taxpayers to not have to build another high school. A middle school would be the next most expensive building we would build. That could be up to $35 million, give or take. And an elementary would be the least expensive option at around $15 million based on comparative buildings that we've seen more recently built. So looking at the additional classroom space that we're doing at Edgewood, as we mentioned, that resolves an immediate issue that we have of having no additional classroom space and allowing these larger classrooms, the larger classes, like the large kindergarten class that's coming through, to be able to migrate all the way through that building. It provides long-term flexibility. So as Jonathan mentioned, those numbers, the further out they get, the more variability there could be. So there's a chance that we start to grow faster, so we need to be able to have options. So with creating this space at Edgewood, Edgewood now becomes about the same size as the most of our other elementaries. So that gives us then the option of looking at if we start to have space issues at Creekview, for instance. Well, we could now look at the idea of reconfiguring our grade levels. So instead of the elementaries being K4, we could move them up to K5, which would alleviate space there. That also would then, you know, if things really started to grow and we couldn't even get to 2029, having Edgewood at that same capacity level would maybe give us the potential of still not having to build the expense of a middle school, but maybe we could get by with just an elementary. So this really gives us a lot of flexibility to help us get to that 2029 year that we would like to do. And ultimately, it protects our taxpayers. Giving us this flexibility helps us to stay off the ballot and get to that 2029 year. So looking at the advantages of this plan, as I mentioned, at a minimum, we're saving $15 million. And again, that's not even counting the operating costs. Obviously, there are costs to what we're doing. You know, we're talking $4 to $4.5 million in the renovations. But the thing to keep in mind is that $4 to $4.5 million is offset by probably 1 year of operating costs for a new building. So while that $4 to $4.5 million in renovations is obviously a significant number, the cost of operating a new building is just as significant, and that's an ongoing annual cost. Obvious advantage is we're doing this without a tax increase, and if we compare that to building a new building, we would be looking at a 6 to 8 mil tax increase. We're taking advantage of an existing asset. I think something to look at there is, I think the school district has taken some flack in prior years. You know, for instance, when we had the old middle school sitting open, I know a lot in the community didn't like that, so I think they were happy when we started using that as the early college high school. As we mentioned, it fixes an immediate need at Edgewood and provides the long-term flexibility we just talked about. Disadvantages. Obviously, the Hope Center is a valued entity in the community, so we would have to be looking to how can we reconfigure and so that they can still provide the services that they do. And one thing we considered when looking at using that building versus the idea of building a new building, if we were to go out and ask for a new levy to open a new building while we still had one of our own assets that we weren't using, in essence, we would be asking to pass a levy for the Hope Center, which is something we couldn't do. So we need to look at using our current assets. Another disadvantage, as I mentioned, is there is a renovation and ongoing maintenance costs of owning or operating that additional building. But as I mentioned, that's more than offset by looking at what those operating costs of a new building would be. And also, as we would be using permanent improvement fund to pay for this, that balance will drop. But the good news with that is, based on our current plans and current projections, we're able to do this without impacting our current maintenance schedule. So for instance, we can do this plan without cutting the number of buses we're going to buy and those kinds of things. So that was great news. Okay, next slide. So next steps, we would be getting a formal agreement with an architect who would just start working on the more final specs, which would then lead to project bids, which would be brought to the board for approval. The Hope Center lease will expire at the end of December, so then we would just be going on a month-to-month basis with the Hope Center. We recently had a brainstorming meeting with the Hope Center just last week. I think we've been a good partner with the Hope Center over the last decade, and we want to continue that. So we want to help in ideas that we can do to help them continue their mission. And one piece of great news we just found is that with the renovations that we're looking at doing, the kitchen that the Hope Center uses for their meals is actually not going to be touched with this first phase of renovations. So that's something that they'll be able to continue to use for a period of time. And then also for our long-term planning, we're looking to create a facilities committee that will be so we can get community input as we look at our long-term facilities plans, things that we talked about such as that 2029 plan, grade configurations, and all those kinds of things.
Todd,
Yes.
if I can, you mentioned bonds and permanent improvement funds, and there's also a general fund. Each of those funds is separately supported by tax issues, is that correct?
Correct.
So that if we are having expenditures out of permanent improvements, that doesn't impact bonds, nor does it impact the operating dollars, so that teacher salaries and benefits and classroom supply, all those kinds of things are still being taken care of in the operating part of the budget. The construction costs and the maintenance, new buses and all those come from the permanent improvement fund. I think we have 2 tax issues that pay into the permanent improvement fund, is that correct?
Correct.
And then we have various bond issues that are paying off the bonds.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And also to clarify, you're restricted. You can only use those funds for the purposes that they're meant to be used for. You can't borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
Exactly. That was the end of my presentation, so if there's any other questions.
Okay. And Diane, did you want to make any comments?
I think they gave you a great overview, but I'm
Yeah.
open to
Okay.
answer questions as well.
Okay, sure. I mean, I know, obviously, this is a challenging situation because everybody who's lived in Marysville for a while knows the value of the services that the Hope Center provides. And like you said, Todd, I really do feel like we've had a wonderful partnership with them. And I also feel like there's real value in ongoing conversations on how we can work through a transition with as little disruption as possible. I was really excited to hear about that kitchen area. I know that's a real important program that they carry out there. I feel like there's a real desire to work together, but the way I see it, at the end of the day, East Elementary really checks a lot of boxes for some district needs, both now and into the future. And, when I look in the past, I think leasing our asset, in my mind, has really been cost neutral at best for our district. And renovating the asset's really going to save taxpayer dollars and result in better utilizing our resources. And I feel like that's a charge for us as board members to make sure that we're using our assets to the best of their abilities. So, and really thank you. And thank you to Ryan and Todd and other staff members. Because of the work that you've done, we do have flexibility in our PI fund. So I think that's pretty impressive to think that we can do some of these major renovations and not impact bus purchases and other kinds of things that we've already planned out long into the future.
Just at a high level, on the information that Jonathan presented, so how are we calculating capacity at each building, and what does that mean for class size?
And with the capacities, it's based on like a functional capacity based on current services and programming that's provided. For instance, like Mill Valley Elementary, why their capacity is so much lower is they offer some specialized services for students on IEPs for the district, and it takes many, many rooms in order to operate that specialized program. So that's what's kind of figured into the different capacity numbers, because there's less rooms where you can have 26 or 28 students in a classroom. For instance, 26 in a kindergarten class or 28 in a grade 1 through 4.
So is it based on at an average classroom, not a special needs classroom, but is it, 3 by 3 per student, or?
It's based on that 26 for K classrooms and 28 for a grade 1 through 4, each one of those classrooms.
So 26 for K and 28 in every classroom.
Right, because for instance, students that go to a specialized classroom for services, they're still counted in a general classroom because of inclusion and everything in those numbers. So they're one of the 26 or they're one of the 28 in those regular classrooms.
And so those classrooms are not counted as usable space.
Right, because they're being utilized for specialized services, because we have to offer that to our kids. we need to offer it to our kids.
There's standards basically for some limitations. So some class sizes may be capped in a specialized unit at 10 at a time. So that classroom in particular will never have 28. It will have 10. Those numbers are growing in particular at Mill Valley. Does that help?
With the enrollment projections, what is I see we have, it shows the different developments that are existing, approved, or in the process. What is the assumptions used, for instance, for single-family lots versus multifamily units?
Well, I would have to ask the expert, Tracy Healy, with FutureThink on that, for the details of that, Mr. Ferguson. But a variety of data is figured into that from what is based on statistics, what's the average number of students that come from multifamily, like apartments, condos, versus how many students come from single-family homes. It's based on a wide variety of data sets used by the experts to help create these projections.
Yeah, if FutureThink can provide that to the board, I think
Absolutely.
that would help us, because there are some single-family lots that are condos, flats, and they're targeting certain demographics. And it's easy to understand the average, the birth rate, but there are families relocating. And so I struggle with the concept of we don't have to build a building until 2029. And obviously the data is going to, it shows what it shows, but knowing exactly, because if we're building homes that are 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes, we're going to assume that there's, what the household sizes are going to be compared to if it's a 2-bedroom flat. And so I know that's getting grainier, but I think that would help understand the projections of growth.
Absolutely. We can definitely get that for you.
I do have a few other questions. What is the projected maintenance cost for East Elementary if the board relocates there, the Board of Education relocates to East Elementary? What's the projected maintenance cost?
Maintenance, are you referring to just ongoing maintenance?
Yeah, I mean, it's an older building, so I'm sure there's addition, it's an older building, so I'm assuming the maintenance costs are going to be higher than your newer buildings.
Well, and some of those will actually be wrapped into the renovation, like for instance, the HVAC, which is quite an expensive venture that needs to be done. So that's wrapped into it, and that will handle a lot of expensive maintenance that's ongoing with an updated system.
Okay.
A more
I could speak
efficient.
a little bit to that. I can't give you an exact number on some things, but just big picture, I guess one from a specific level, right now, utilities for that building run around $4,000 per month. Now, those utilities currently are being paid by the Hope Center. So that's one change that would happen. Second, the way that our current lease is set up, if there is an issue that, a big ticket item that needs paid for, we're going to have to pay for it. So that's not a new cost. That's something that's already in our permanent improvement forecast. So really, when you're looking at new costs, it's really going to be more those operating costs, not the big ticket items like a new roof and those kinds of things.
Right, because we would have to do those maintenance fixes anyway.
2 more questions. Have we just maybe imagined a plan where we can relocate Tri-Academy to the current headquarter building and share space with the Hope Center?
Tri-Academy to where?
To the current administrative, the current Board of Education
to Edgewood. Yeah, I mean, you want me to speak to that? I mean, we did discuss that, and that wasn't an option we felt was a great option. One, you would have teenagers driving in and out of a building right next to the elementary where you have kids crossing. So we felt that would probably create a safety issue, was one of our main issues. And then I think secondly, we've heard over and over from the kids at Tri that they really feel a connection to that building, and they like having their own building there, their own space in that building.
Do you, and my last question, I'm sorry, is what is the cost of a delayed action? So the timeline is pretty aggressive, in my opinion, for, relocating the Hope Center somewhere in the community. What's the cost or the estimated cost of if we delay this by a year?
Well, there's two ways to look at cost. One, looking at cost would potentially be inflationary costs. So if we don't do it now, does the cost of doing it go down or does it go up? And, we can't answer that for sure, but most likely the cost goes up. So you might add several percent to that $4 million price tag. But I guess the other cost would be the educational cost. So looking at Edgewood right now, that, you could speak to the principal there, and he would tell you that he already is, the building is tight. So the reason we're looking at such a aggressive timeline is that we can't make this happen for next school year. So we're already pushing it out to the following school year. What that means is that kindergarten class right now, that's the biggest that we've ever had, next year they're going to be in first grade, which means that's an additional classroom that they need, which right now Edgewood says they don't have. So by the time we actually implement this plan, that largest class will now be in second grade, which most likely means an additional classroom as well. So I guess the cost of waiting would just be, what are they going to do at Edgewood?
So I understand we're not voting on this, these plans tonight, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
So a couple things were mentioned that I'm thinking about for what will be coming up for the new board very soon. And one of them was this point about the kitchen being, I think one of you said the kitchen is still going to be available to the Hope Center. So the question I think for the new board in 2022 to focus on is how does that all work? If the Hope Center is going to a month-to-month lease, correct? And then eventually that would have to end with all these renovations and with the board moving into that building. But it sounds like there's some parts of that building that won't be used by this district either ever or right away. So how does that work out, that there may still be some Hope Center services provided out of that building? I'm trying to picture that part of it.
I can do that. I just want to just respond to that a little bit, and obviously them too. But I guess as I was thinking about this and looking at the timeline, and also thinking about when we've gone through some other pretty significant changes or ideas, to me, it's a positive that we do have some time in here, because there has been, in my opinion, a pretty collaborative spirit, and I know we see a lot of people out here in the audience. There's people who are very invested in the services that are provided there, and I think want to work together and brainstorm and come up with some ideas. And I think about just a few things that have changed in the last several weeks since some of these things have been talked about, and already I'm hearing some ideas like, oh, that's an improvement. And so I feel like this timeline allows for that conversation, for more people to share their thoughts and come up with the best solution possible. So
I think that's fair. I mean, when we first talked with Jean, the request was to let us get that plan in our hands and see what exactly was going to be impacted and what was not going to be impacted in this phase of the renovation. And the kitchen definitely is not going to be impacted at this time. And that's what I heard over and over again is one of the most, not that all the functions aren't important, but one of the primary functions and concerns was really finding a commercial kitchen available in such a short amount of time. And that time frame would be July that we asked for that building to be opened up. And so really, when that became very clear that that was not going to be touched, I have talked to Jean just preliminarily about that being a possibility. Currently, from my understanding, patrons are not coming in and eating their meals. I think that was a goal to bring that back, but it hasn't been that way since COVID. So potentially keeping the same, I want to say grab and go, that's probably not the greatest phrase, but type style, so that we could continue to kind of partner and meet that need of our community if possible. So that's where that stands at this time, you know. And I did reach out as well and just offer the opportunity to sit down, you know, with the board or the ministerial association and have those kind of conversations to see what we could figure out and how we could work together and during that transition.
Sorry for the additional question here, but have we explored a possibility of finding or building a new building for the board, or finding a lease for the administrative board to relocate to?
I would say that we have looked at if there are other buildings that would meet our needs, and I would say that I don't know of any. We're obviously open. If somebody knows of a building that would meet our needs, then we would certainly be open to that, but we have not seen one that even comes close to meeting all of those boxes, you know, checking all of those boxes for what we're looking to accomplish. The idea of building a building would come at a significantly higher price tag than what we would be able to do by renovating.
Would you estimate that would be over $5 million?
I don't want to give an estimate, just because, you know, we were looking at the cost of school buildings. Now, I've not really investigated the cost of the type of building that would house the things we're talking about, but when you're looking at the square footage that would be required, I would have to assume you'd be talking, you know, $8 million and above.
And I guess the drawback with that would be we would not have that type of flexibility in our PI fund.
And just follow up on your earlier question, Mr. Ferguson, the national average for a new single-family home is 41 students for every 100 homes, and then 20 students for every 100 apartments. And that's a national average, which is even higher than the state average.
And I also recall, Todd, you saying that the company that we're using, they also used when you were at Old and Tangi.
Yeah, I think they do the majority of enrollment projections across the entire state. Now, again, that doesn't mean they couldn't be wrong or things couldn't change here, which is why, like I mentioned, the most important part of this plan is the flexibility it creates. It doesn't mean that we automatically hit our plan and reach our goal of 2029, but what it does mean is it creates that flexibility to potentially avoid a new middle school in asking for such a big levy ask. But having said that, you know, the numbers that they put together at Olentangy were typically spot on, and, you know, obviously the amount of growth they're having there was, you know, well above what we're looking at.
And Jonathan, if I'm not mistaken, it's who we used the last time as well, correct?
Correct.
And we're
Right.
within 2%
Right.
of where we
And-
were
and-
the last time?
And obviously, there could very well be a little COVID impact in that number. So, you know, maybe
I mean,
without COVID, it might have been right on.
Right, and that's one of the questions around kindergarten,
Yes.
right? And so we'll continue to monitor that. As you know, kindergarten registration is around the corner, and so that will help us as well.
Okay.
I apologize. Is there any way, so for the East Elementary School, is there any way where we can see space split between Tri-Academy, the Board of Education, and the Hope Center? Have we looked at the drawing map and see if there's any way we could meet all three needs?
That's in fact, I think, what I've offered, to have that conversation of what priorities. I don't believe from my initial conversation that we can certainly encompass everything that is currently a function of the Hope Center. But I did ask about priorities, and maybe there are transitions that could take place, during the time of relocation, and things could still happen out of that building at the same time. I just would say I believe those conversations are ongoing. They're not complete.
And I do, and that's really, I think, what I was kind of referring to with this whole timeline, that there is some time in there to continue having conversations. And when you look at the renovation and see some of those blank areas, it's okay, here's potentially some opportunity. So I guess what timeline, share what you see as the timeline moving forward. I mean, we've seen the general timeline, but as far as any board action on anything, would it just be,
Well, we will be engaging with the architect almost immediately.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure how long that would take in terms of bids. I would assume late winter to early spring in terms of bringing bids to the board.
okay. So that does allow us some more conversation, obviously, but unless anyone has very strong reservations.
I think it's, as a board, our focus is on the academic and educational opportunities for kids in our schools. And the growth that has occurred in the community has had an impact on everything in our community. There's no exception. And that impact will continue to grow. And from my seat, as having taught economics, there's a term called utility that means the usefulness of something. And growth has impacted the assets that we have. And we have some assets that are at capacity. We have some assets that are under capacity at this point. We have, as a district, a school district, we have a responsibility to make the highest and best use of the assets that we possess, because we have a duty to the taxpayers to make sure that that happens. And so there is no disagreement that the programs and services that the Hope Center provides are absolutely necessary for our community. For our families. And I sincerely believe that we have a heart to work compassionately to try to make sure that things turn out as best as they may. But I see my role as a board member to make sure that I'm doing and fulfilling my responsibilities to the taxpayers that have voted tax dollars to be used for the education of the children in our community. And certainly, as I said, the East Building has taken on a different light as a matter of the growth that has occurred, and it has become something, an asset that we have that has greater use for our school district. And I think it would be difficult for us to turn to the voters and ask for additional money to build a building when we have a building that is available to us. I think that would be a problem for us.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I would go, and not that, my concern here is the Hope Center is a very supported by our community, and the decisions by this board that may negatively impact their operations. I know their operations are going to be impacted in some way, shape, or form. I just don't want our decisions to impact the goodwill, that the community support, that it could come back to harm us as well if we take something like a valuable organization like the Hope Center and there's no longer a space for them in our community. And they do serve our families in their district, most of the most vulnerable. And so that's my concern, is making sure that we're not making a decision that if we could figure out how to keep the Hope Center in that area. If we can share the building 3 ways, I think that would be the best path forward, because not only will we show fiscal responsibility, and I thank the administration for providing a plan that's not, hey, let's just assume we have a bunch of growth and we need to, build a new building. I like the conservative nature of the plan. The fiscal responsibility, I like that. I just also know that community partnership is also, it can pay dividends in the future, and that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so, and that's why I'm proud of the partnership that we've had, and I'm proud of the attitude of looking at things and trying to continue to work together and brainstorm, so, yep. Okay, well, thank you very much for all that time and effort that's gone into the presentation. And now, I do see that we have our Employees of the Month here, so I would like to call them up just so that we can see you and we can shake your hands, if you don't mind. We have Lynn, Hamm, and Tammy Ryan. Sure, go ahead, you can read again, yes. Yep. It's down. There it is.
I make you stand here in front of everyone and be really embarrassed. I already read it once, so I'm going to read it again. It's okay. But I think it's important that you hear.
We just want to let you know we are not usually late, and when we were sent
We
the
looked at the
letter,
letter,
they
we're
gave us
like,
the wrong
"This is
time, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll fix that. That's all right. Well, it's always nice to be doubly recognized, right? Right. Okay. So this is the first one I've ever had that's a joint submission, so that's kind of interesting. But Lynn and Tammy are constantly willing to help with our students all day, every day. They are always going from classroom to classroom or the library or even study hall to help students pass their classes when they are struggling. They never complain and work tirelessly year-round. They do the recycling each week. They are here before 7 a.m., and both have an advisory, even though they're not teachers. They go above and beyond for kids in this building every day. So congratulations. We appreciate everything you do. There you go. Congratulations. Just be careful.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, we are now to public participation. I think there's maybe some people here who have not been to our meetings before, so just a reminder, although we're not required to have public participation, we do all feel that it's very important to offer our community an opportunity to address the board during our public meetings. During our board, per our board policy, we allot a total of 30 minutes for public participation, with each person having up to 3 minutes to address the board. And our focus is to listen, and when necessary, ensure that there's follow-up that takes place. It's not meant to be a discussion, so we're not going to be asking questions and bantering back and forth, but we do ask that you start out by stating your name and address for the record, and our treasurer will keep track of the time and let you know when your time is up. And we ask that you please be respectful of this time restriction, and because I do think we have 10 people on here. So we will start with Mr. Gene Miller.
When does my time start? Like now? Okay. All right. Members of the school board and school administration, for those of you that may not know, my name is Gene Miller. I'm from 1103 London Avenue here in Marysville. I'm president of the Marysville Area Ministerial Association, the organization that started the Hope Center and I served as a volunteer and a resident of our great school district. The Hope Center became a reality of a dream in December of 2011. The original vision still holds true today, and that is to see the needs of every person in our community met, physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. We knew this was only possible through the body of Christ working together. In November of 2011, about 25 pastors took out the lease from the school district to help the Hope Center become a reality. I don't know if any of us realized at the time how extraordinary our community is. To get 25 pastors to agree to anything is a miracle in and of itself. To get them to work together with the local school districts and other agencies might be an even bigger miracle. The Hope Center has helped so many in our community that have been directly impacted and lives transformed, futures changed by what happens by the ministries there. This has been the reality for the past 10 years. The discussion has been up to this point that the district had a desire for the Hope Center to purchase the building, and however, within the past 2 weeks, the Hope Center was informed of the school districts, by the school administration, of the intent to not renew our annual lease and to utilize the school district or the school building for district purposes. This came as an extreme surprise and obviously a great deal of concern. We've already seen the growing concern from those that will be most affected by the loss of resources and ministries of the Hope Center. The concern expressed most was that the Hope Center was closing. This is not going to happen. We know that God is not done yet. The ministerial association in our community are already working together to find solutions. However, due to the unique needs associated with the Hope Center, like a gymnasium, an auditorium, commercial kitchen, let alone the other ministries located in the 53,000 square foot facility, makes it so that the Hope Center cannot just move anywhere. Even the location is critical to the ministries of so many of our clients that don't have transportation and have to walk to other resources in our community. We're committed to working with community leaders and others that understand the devastating loss for those that often don't have a voice or someone to look out for them to solve this challenge. The school district has been an incredible partner in helping the Hope Center impact our community in such a powerful way. We could not have done it without their help, and for that, we thank all of you. It is disappointing that we're now faced with the idea that something that our community so desperately needs and has worked so hard to become a reality may be displaced without consideration of the much larger impact on our community rather than just the school district's needs. Tonight I'm here to humbly ask our school administration, the school board members, to pause, slowing this process to allow for the possibility for a win-win situation for the school district, the Hope Center, and most importantly, our community. We know and trust that God has a solution for our community for it to be taken care of. And I know many of you are people of faith, and we ask that you would join with us in praying for the right solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, Lori Spain.
Good evening. My name is Lori Spain. I live at 10080 Harriet Road, Marysville. And I'm going to share some numbers with you, but as I share those numbers, will you just imagine with me the faces, the households, and the students that these numbers really represent. So we have served from January 2021 to present 125 homeless families. 32% of those families have children. At the Hope Center, those families are provided with resources for shelter. Tents, because we don't have a shelter, and $10,000 to date has been spent on hotel costs for families to be sheltered. We provide showers, 371 shower referrals. We send people, we partner with the YWCA, and they're able to allow people to shower. We provide 983 households with emergency assistance this year, and we're not even through December, and so that number will be over 1,000 households that have been served with emergency assistance, to the total of $141,000 in financial assistance. We also, this is in relation to the kitchen and feeding people. We have served 17,200 hot meals this year. We're projecting to serve 150 Christmas dinner baskets. We've served 370 baked lunches so that people can go to work with a lunch. And for the people who are living in their cars or in housing transition. I just wanted to share some of those numbers so that you can get a snapshot of what is happening at the Hope Center. And when people come, they can come to a one-stop shop. They don't have to try to figure out with transportation how to get here, how to get there. Their furniture needs are met, their clothing needs are met, emergency assistance is met, and they're getting a hot meal. So thank you so much for your consideration. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for partnering with us. And thank you for the Hope Center.
Thank you very much. Next, Jeff Schooley.
Hello, my name is Jeff Schooley, 1305 Millstone Drive here in Marysville, just up the road. I'm the pastor at First Presbyterian Church located in historic uptown Marysville. I want to begin by saying that I do not relish the fact that I must come and speak to you today. You see, long before I was a pastor, I was a nerd. That means that school, the Madison School District in Mansfield, Ohio specifically, was my safe haven. I love everything about public education. I have public educators in my family. I myself have adjuncted at publicly funded community colleges in my past career and hope to do so again in the future. So ideally, I would be at home tonight watching the season finale of the CSI Las Vegas reboot instead of, being here, trusting that the proceedings that were happening here were going on to the benefit of every citizen in our community without my involvement. Sadly, I fear that may not be the case. In addition to my service to this community as a pastor, I'm also a member of MAMA and of the Hope Center's advisory board. It is my commitments to these fine organizations that has told me about this change that is about to occur that may leave the Hope Center homeless. This should be as unacceptable to everyone in the community, including the elected members of you, the school board, as it is to me. It seems to me that we have plenty of stones left to turn over before this drastic step, a step that I should note will harm many students that this school board is chartered to serve. Easy alternatives such as remote working for administrators, which is a more and more common practice in every field and businesses within those fields, thanks to COVID-19, could be considered. Rental trailers or modulars, as I've learned they're called, could be used for administrators instead of students. That's a possibility. Simply put, if this wasn't the alternative you were going to take, what would be your plan B? Please consider plan B. I am sure that there is at least another half a dozen or so alternatives that we could pursue before we cut and slash away at the physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual support that the Hope Center offers our most vulnerable neighbors. I call upon the school board to think holistically about their decisions, to consider the ways that the Hope Center benefits some of their most vulnerable students. It's very easy to imagine a future in which today's easy solution becomes tomorrow's hardship. A hardship when a high school student with too much time on his hand no longer has an after-school program to come to, or adults. Does that mean I have to stop?
Yes, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, well then let me leave you with this.
Sure.
May God bless you in your decision, but may you bless the God who shows up in the hungry, the thirsty, and the impoverished with your decision as well.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ellen Trott.
Before I start my time, I'm like a proud mother. I've got Scott and Kim and Kenny and Ashley and Lynn and Tammy. They're all mine, so thank you. I'm Ellen Trott from 1985 to 2013. I was Director of Special Education for Student Services those last 15 years, and before that, I taught at the middle school kids with learning disabilities and behavior disorders. And I loved my time with Marysville Schools. I've told everyone it's the best job anybody could have had. But tonight, I'm coming here strictly as a volunteer for the Hope Center, which I've done for the last 8 years. I serve every Tuesday in the Emergency Assistance Program, and I meet with clients who have made appointments to help with a variety of concerns. I will mention later some of the ways that we've been able to help these families and how I hope we can continue to do so. My goal tonight is to sincerely ask if there's any way for the Hope Center ministries to be able to stay under one roof at East Elementary. Without all of these services offered in one building, especially with a full kitchen, needs may not be met. And if we at the Hope Center cannot help the folks of our town and community, it directly affects all of our kids, our students. Whether it's homeless families, the need for affordable housing, rent payments, proper clothing, personal needs, furniture, meals, food, drug and alcohol concerns, shower vouchers, legal clinic, prayer ministry, and before COVID, we had after-school tutoring and open gym. If we're able to do that and meet those needs at the Hope Center, then folks, you don't have to worry about them at school because we're taking care of our kids. I've been blessed to serve many of the families I worked with at Marysville Schools, either as parents, grandparents, or my kids who are now adults and struggling with life issues. Because I'm a familiar face, we can hug, laugh, and cry together, and then we move on to solve the problems and what the Hope Center can do to help them. As I said earlier, the main reason I'm here tonight is my concern for the Hope Center ministries and how to keep them under one roof. I can't begin to tell you all the stories and times that one of my clients came in for a certain concern, but after talking with them, I found out a deeper, more personal, or embarrassing problem they had, and we were able to solve it because the answer was under one roof. Just Tuesday, I had a young woman come in. She's pregnant with her third baby. She was there to sign up for beds in the furniture bank. But through our conversation, I found out they had no heat in their apartment. And we were able to walk down the hall and find 2 space heaters and send them home with her because we were all in one building. I wish you could have seen the look on her face and how eternally grateful she was. Or the times our homeless folks come in. They just need a place to sit or a meal, and we give them a tent, a bike, or a ride to a shelter. I'll just go to the end. I've got other stories I wanted to share with you. I just added this this morning because it was at the beginning of my devotions, and it said, "Be willing to go out on a limb with me. If that is where I'm leading you, it is the safest place to be." And I'm praying that we all will go out on that limb together to serve the families in Marysville who are in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I believe it says Tanya Britton.
Tanya Britton, 834 Watermill Place. I'm a Southerner. I'm going to try and talk fast for the 3-minute limit. Thank you for your service to the community. Thank you for leasing to the Hope Center in the first place. Thank you for being in search of some form of human service relief. I've been doing that for 36 years in one form or the other. Never have I ever seen a better functioning comprehensive care center for those in need than here in the Hope Center. Every community needs to have a Hope Center. People have begged and wanted and wished and tried and planned, and even our governmental offices acknowledge that Every county in the state needs a Hope Center. Every community should have that. I've served most every week at Hope Center as part of the prayer ministry, the commitment to call that I was called here to do, interacting with, praying with, and aiding with the help as much as I could. I was there when the rest of our county was not functioning, serving meals alongside to help feed people in this community. I'm going to ask some questions that I hope everybody will think about. They may be misguided, and if so, I will stand corrected. But I'm going to ask them knowing you can't answer them right now. I just want you to think. How many folks are asking to make decisions about how Hope Center functions, not knowing how it actually functions on a day-to-day? Kitchen space, for example, I'm glad you mentioned that because that would be interesting. Are we all aware that Hope Center had the first right of refusal in this lease agreement originally? And the neighbors were involved, and I don't think anyone's mentioned them. Did both bids submitted by Hope Center get to all of the school board? That should be due process. Has the entity that bid against Hope Center considered financially aiding collaboratively with the needs of the Hope Center or the school board, or both? Given the explosion of growth that's obvious with all the housing going up around here, even with a substantial savings planned that would effectively disband consolidated services to our most needy, heavy taxation is an unavoidable thing. We're exploding. Dublin is oozing. We're going to have to do some sort of heavy taxation that's coming. Why would the board, only a month ago, with obvious knowledge of growth, even entertain Hope Center through a bidding process if they knew already it wasn't going to go anywhere? Something changed, and something changed quickly. And what was that exactly? Has anyone spoken to those neighbors? How did 212 Chestnut go from being a stated liability from the board members' voices to an asset so quickly? The kids and the families who must use the Hope Center to meet their basic needs will be affected by this decision if Hope Center is affected in this way. And that affectation will show up in schools, it will show up on the streets of Marysville in a myriad of ways, and it will show up in mental anguish. Our mental health centers, we're so concerned about our kids. This is going to effectively dissipate a lot of work that has been done proactively. I am pleading with you to reconsider the extrication of the Hope Center. This entire community will suffer from making services that they provide succinctly right now one more hardship or series of hurdles that they have to jump. Please, administrative offices and storage space you can find anywhere. Comprehensive care for those in the most need, can't. Please consider this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, Ed Beeson.
As you've said, my name's Ed Beeson. I've served as a minister to the Marysville community off and on for almost 24 years now. That may be close to tenure, I'm not sure. One thing I've learned in ministry is that we frequently find ourselves, such as you in positions of service on the board, in places and positions with decisions to make that we would rather not ever have to deal with. You have our prayers, as we hope that we have yours. As a believer in God and a follower of Jesus Christ, my option is not an option. My responsibility is to learn more about Jesus, that I might teach more about Jesus, that I might love more like Jesus, because if I don't, all that I know is worthless. And ultimately then that I begin to look more like Jesus in how I choose to live my life. That's not just my responsibility as minister, but it's also the responsibility that I teach and encourage in every believer that I have the opportunity to deal with, whether it's in my church or in my community. If we're in church, we talk about the church needing to function together as a body of Christ, with each muscle and ligament, providing what it can, supporting the whole body. If it's a school or a team, like Marysville's football team and other sports, it requires teamwork. No one individual can ball hog. We can't depend on being one-dimensional, or we fail. If it's a community, it requires cooperation, or Apparently, the trendy word is collaboration. Kind of sick of hearing that, but seems to be true nonetheless. On the website of the district, there are 12 different values. One of those values states that open and honest communication is critical for effective relationships. I pray that you remember that, because that seems to have been in rather short supply lately, and that's unfortunate. The highlight of the superintendent's message on that same school website says, among other things, that the community and schools collaborate and support each other. Hopefully that's happening in a greater degree than what maybe it has happened in the past. Let me conclude with this. We're well aware of the consequences when a community loses confidence in the honesty of a school administration or its school board. I'm grateful that nobody's being dragged out here half naked and shows up on Facebook tonight. But it would be tragic to see the erosion or even the destruction of a healthy relationship between a community, its churches, and its school, especially at tax levy time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Alex Harrison.
Sue, we've got about 8 minutes if we're keeping to that 30.
It's all right. I was just waiting on you guys. It's okay.
Go for it.
My name is Alex Harrison. I currently reside at 15700 Valley View Drive in Marysville. And if I can get through the Union County building process, I will be moving into a new home at 715 Meadow Ridge Way within about 2 weeks in Marysville. I also run a forum called Marysville People in the Know, which some of you may at times feel it could be a dumpster fire, as it gives me gray hair, being 33 years of age. But on the back end of that forum, you guys only get to see a part of what Marysville People is about, okay? You get to see basically the funny jokes, the people complaining about Coleman's Crossing, all of that fun stuff. On the back end of the forum, you don't get to see the amount of requests that we have come in for families in need of certain things. Electric bills paid, gas bills paid, financial help, gift help, all of the help that the Hope Center constantly does on a day-to-day basis. A lot of those posts won't go through because we're constantly giving them direction to go towards the Hope Center. Go to the Hope Center because they can help you. I want to share a story with you. This past year during COVID, the mobile market out in Magnetic Springs, it was ridiculously hot out there, and we all had to have masks on and make sure that we're giving the food to the community in a safe way, okay? Making sure the boxes are off the ground, making sure we are staying compliant. The amount of families that we had that came through at the Magnetic Springs mobile food market from Marysville would absolutely blow your mind. Directing traffic out there, almost getting hit by cars every single first Wednesday of the month. I was there. And, you know, with my schedule running the companies the way that I run them, my time has to be divided all over the place. But I wanted to make sure I was there because I was asked to go out there and, you know, help serve our community. The need of what this Hope Center does for our town, for the members of the community that are truly in need, is absolutely mind-blowing. I understand this is a business decision. It's going to be a tough decision no matter what you guys do, no matter how you attack it, no matter what goes on. I'm hoping that there's going to be a win-win-win situation for everybody, the win being for the school board, the Hope Center, and for God. For everything that that Hope Center represents, I can tell you there are so many families that are in need, and just from literally seeing it from the forum side, you guys get to see it from face value from the Hope Center, but on the back end of that forum, there's a team of admins nonstop going through requests of people that are in need. So all I can say is before you guys make your decision, please do everything you can to collaborate together, come together for the best solution for the schools, for Marysville, and for the churches and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we have Becky Bolt.
Good evening. My name is Becky Bolt. I reside at 555 Wagon Wheel Lane here in Marysville, Ohio, although I should say 212 Chestnut Street because I'm there most of the time, right? I am the executive director at the Hope Center, but what I wanted to talk to you about tonight is the heart that I see there, the heart of the people that come in and volunteer. We all were volunteers at one time. We didn't start out there. We didn't go there to make great amounts of money or anything like that. We came there to serve and help the community, and that's what we continue to do. We see those faces walk in every single day that each one of these people have talked about. We see the relief, we see the joy, we see the tears for having to come and ask for help in the first place, which is very difficult. When you see a grown man come in and ask for help and say, I used to help here and now I'm asking for help, it touches your heart. At least it does mine, and I know it touches yours too. I know that. I don't for 1 minute doubt that you guys all have good hearts, that you want to see the good works continue, that the Hope Center does. I don't doubt that 1 minute, and I also understand, being the business person for the Hope Center, I understand, Diane, where you're coming from. I get that. I absolutely get that. What we would like to see, and several have said it, is that we all come together. Let's get Mama together. Let's get the Hope Center together. Let's get you guys together, the board, the administration. Let's see if we can't find some type of win-win for all of us. We don't see us being separated out. I don't know how that works when we've got the people coming in that have all of the needs that can be met right there. I'm not sure, and I can't see that in my mind. Doesn't mean that God doesn't have a plan for us elsewhere. I don't know that. You know, he hasn't let me in on that one yet, which I wish he would have, but I don't know. I do want you to know that the partnership with us, especially with the tutoring program, Tri-Academy, we love having Tri-Academy there. When COVID was going on and we did not have the kids there, it was just so weird because we were used to that. We have tutored over 110 students throughout the year with 34 of the teachers from your very schools. That's who come and help these kids. And we've seen these kids grow and blossom for the one-on-one that they get that maybe is not possible at the schools, but it's possible at the Hope Center. We've also been gifted with funding from our county commissioners, from our city of Marysville, and from United Way. They trusted us to run their funding through us to help those people that needed help during COVID, for housing, for mortgages, for utilities, for whatever came through for us. They trusted us to record, report, and vet, and report back to them what we were doing and where the funding was going. So I think that speaks volumes that the city and the county actually trust what we're doing. I think they believe in what we're doing, the same as you believe in what we're doing. However, this is such a short timeline for us to try and move this much, to trying to find a place and then to move this much too, is just next to impossible. God bless every one of you.
I know we're running a little short on time, but if we've got 2 more people to speak, is everyone okay with that? Okay, next up we have Chris Schmink.
My remarks will be very brief, as you can tell by the size of my notebook here. So my name is Chris Schmink. I live at 872 Edgewood Drive. I just want to thank everyone involved. I want to thank all of you at the school district for being such a wonderful partner. I got involved at the Hope Center in the early years when we couldn't pay our lease payments, and Todd and others gave us grace. We didn't have the money to keep up with the utility bills, and the school district gave us grace. So you have been a wonderful partner. Thank you for that. I want to thank all of those who have volunteered and staffed the Hope Center. You have served God tremendously, and it's caused my faith to blossom and grow. And I know that that good work of God will not stop here. I want to thank those who are looking for solutions. I've been receiving calls from people around the community with suggestions of what could happen with the Hope Center, what could happen with the school district. It shows to me that we have a community that wants to find solutions and wants to pull together, and I know that will happen. So I just encourage us all to keep an open heart. I have prayed nonstop about this. I'm praying that we all continue to listen to God, to look for those solutions, and I know that together our community will continue to find a way to serve those in need. We've done it well, and we'll continue. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Last up on our list, Mr. Lulan. You withdraw your name? Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so again, thank you all so much for sharing your comments with the board. We do take all these comments that we hear into consideration and appreciate, just appreciate the passion that everyone has. So thank you very much. Okay, let me see if I can get back to.
I'm sorry, am I able to ask for a point of order? There was I know it's probably out of order, but there was a remark about the timeline of the Hope Center wasn't, wanting to bid on the property and why it changed. I don't think we highlighted that. We talked about the timeline of the study coming in. Could we just speak briefly to that so we can clear that air, that there's no, like the timeline of the study coming in and why the sudden change?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you want to hit that, or you want me to? Well, I think I kind of alluded to it in my presentation that we had a enrollment study done around 3 years ago or so, and I think we felt like, and I think most people in the community felt like, things are different. Everything's exploding, housing's exploding, apartments are coming in like crazy, so we're going to have to build a new building. And I think me and Diane, I know we're on that same line of thinking. We're not going to be able to make our plan. We're going to have to build a new building. So let's do a new enrollment study, which will lead to our long-term facilities plan. Those results just came out within the last month or so, which then led to us changing our thinking because we weren't growing as fast as we thought we were. So that changed our thinking of, okay, so if we don't have to build a new building, we don't have to ask for a third levy in a period of 4 or 5 years, what can we do? And that's where this came about. That's kind of the reason for the quick turnaround.
I just wanted to make sure the audience heard
understood that timing.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, next up on our agenda, we have a presentation from Tri Academy. Mr. Stockhouse, welcome.
Thank you for letting me present. Honestly, it's an honor to be here. I'm privileged to be the principal now at Tri Academy, and it's truly been a blessing. I was able to take over leadership after 2 amazing people. So I've got to start by saying I was blessed to enter into a building where things are just running and operating in a very smooth fashion. So go ahead and click off to the next. Yeah. It's interesting, but I wanted to start off with thank you, and a lot of people end with thank you. But what we do at Tri, we work with a lot of people, and the first thing I wanted to do is thank the people, some of the people that we work with. Obviously, Board of Education, what you guys allow us to do is absolutely incredible. So thank you for allowing us to do this. We're working closely with Honda Marysville, Impact 60, the Union County Sheriff's Office, the local Realtors Association, Mosier's IGA, and Kevin Barber, who runs a One Focus Foundation. I purposely wanted to put a picture up here, and we always refer to ourselves as our Tri family. You guys can't see it, but what I absolutely adore about this picture is this is our afternoon group. I wish you could see all the smiles. And I say that because, and I'll get emotional, and I apologize for that. I've known most of these kids for 2 to 3 years, and I got to see them grow at the high school, and I got to see their struggles. Who they are now is different than who they were 6 months ago, and that is what's awesome. Sorry. Next slide, please. We've had a ton of successes at Tri Academy. And I honestly just want to start with a few. We've got 9 students who we call early completers. What does that mean? That means that they have fulfilled all 21 credits to graduate and passed all of their state testing requirements. So they are completely done. Some of them came to us as sophomores, others have been juniors, and we've even had a couple who have joined us their senior year. We've got them across the finish line. They have completed 9 down, and we've got more to go. We've got 168.5 credits earned. What does that really mean? We're a group of 50 kids right now, and that may not seem like a lot. A lot of these kids come to us with 2 or 3 credits. They are credit deficient. They don't like doing schoolwork. They work their tails off to get this done. 50 of those they have done through Apex, and that's our online credit recovery program, and 93 of them have been teacher-led classes. I've got to give a shout out to the staff at Tri Academy. They are unbelievable. This is a short video of one of our seniors. Nathan, I asked him if I could share this. He came to us from Springfield this year. He struggled. He was truant, he didn't do school, and he became friends with somebody who graduated from Marysville that went through some of the same struggles. He joined us, and it was hard for him. He's 18 years old, lives with grandma and grandpa, and he enrolled himself at Marysville schools after he moved up here. This is the celebration.
Here today. Where are they? Where are they?
Cody, get out here.
Come on out and celebrate with us, everybody.
Cody. Who else? Jack?
He said, Ladies and gentlemen, I am so proud to announce Nathan Carmesino. Did I pronounce it right?
His
I
last
love it.
name's hard to
Nathan
pronounce.
Carmesino has completed all 21 credits and is officially done with all of his classes at Tri Academy. Yes, sir.
So what you don't see behind the scenes are all the teachers in the hallway, all the kids in the hallway. We are a family congratulating each other. He worked his tail off. If you guys want to watch it again, we can, but we don't have to. I also wanted to share a few testimonials, and you know what? I'm not going to read this. A cool project that they do, their English 12 class, they write their graduation speech. I purposely didn't bring them because I knew I would cry. But if you take bits and pieces out of each one of those graduation speeches, it is absolutely incredible to see where these kids have come from. The trauma, the mental health, the addiction, the homelessness, and you can go on and on and on. These kids are incredible, and they're going to do amazing things in this world. And I could not be more proud of who I work with, who I am privileged to work with. Yeah. So that's my love for the kids. Where are we? What are we doing in day-to-day operations? I shared with you a little bit about credits. This week we're doing state testing. That causes a lot of anxiety for our students. It's not easy. We've got 35 kids who need one or more tests, 69 tests that need to be administered total. Our kids have been wonderful. They've worked together. They've written Post-it notes to each other. So we're loud. The people at the Hope Center will tell you we're loud, and we have a lot of fun. During testing week, we take care of each other. Our hallway's quiet, and they do that purposely. They understand that this is what we need at this time. Next slide. Where do we go from here? And this is truly what's exciting. And I've had some conversations with people in the audience. I've had some conversations with people up on the stage. Tri Academy, to me, it's the best of the best. It's the hidden jewel of Marysville. I can't tell you how much I love making phone calls to parents, kids who are credit deficient, who are struggling. They feel like they don't fit in. They feel like they will never graduate, to tell them about Tri Academy. And almost everybody I talk to says, I've never heard of you. You know, this is amazing. And we try to get kids in so they can see what we are doing. Our goal is to grow Tri Academy. How do we grow the program? How do we travel the program? Because it doesn't have to always be where, so, and what I mean by that is, can we have a Tri Academy in other buildings? We've started with T2 at the high school. That's going very well. We are reaching kids there. There are some kids that still need us at Tri Academy, but our goal will be to have that T2 type program in other buildings as well. Bunzl Middle School, almost every building in this district could use what we have. So our goal is to grow, grow, grow so that we can reach more kids. Mrs. Hammersmith will be mad at me, and I told her I was putting this on here. Her capstone project, she's getting a master's in educational leadership. Her capstone project is based off of how do we grow this program. So I've got tremendous workers at the building doing everything they can to create opportunities for kids to be successful, and it's an amazing place. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I apologize for the tears, but I'll do it all over again.
And I had started out with a Kleenex over here, and I stuck it over by my purse. I don't know what I was thinking when I knew Tri-Academy was going to present. No, I mean, Scott, it's so clear that you're passionate about what you do and how much you care for those kids, and we see the results in their results.
Thank you for presenting tonight, Scott. I have to admit, our first two principals, Ashley Thompson and Jennifer Hinderer, were such great leaders and had such a heart that I had a tiny twinge of concern, but I can see that you have the leadership and the passion for the program and for the kids, and I'm really glad to see that. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. You can't replace these two.
Yeah, Scott had the pleasure of visiting about a week ago, and you were busy at that time, so I didn't get a chance to directly speak to you. So I will tell you, it was a marvelous visit, and we had a great opportunity to talk with the staff there, find out just the incredible work that they're doing. We had a chance to meet some of the students, and while not all of them were smiling all of the time, it was evident that being there at Tri, being part of the family, is extremely important to them. And even if they were sitting there contemplating whether they wanted to really do their social studies project that was due, you could tell that there was a commitment to see this through. And for many of those kids, commitment is one of the toughest things. So thank you, and thank all the staff at Tri. Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment really quickly. When Sue and I visited with you and the kids, you did have us read the graduation speeches, and we both left in tears.
Any other comments?
I would just say one thing. I'm new to the board, but I am not new to being, I've previously served as a mentor to some of the students, and I'm aware of the foster care experience and some of the impact of the students that you're serving. And I want to thank you because education is opportunity, and this is sometimes the last door of opportunity for many kids. And so your work is important, and we want you to grow and want you to expand that positive impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, reports. High Point report, Ms. Savage.
Just a couple quick points. The STARS committee is working on the strategic plan. They met yesterday, as a matter of fact, to work on the Ohio High Point strategic plan for the next 5 years. Also, this week they did a construction meeting update. As most of you are aware, the Ohio High Point is doing a major renovation, and they have about a good page and a half of punch items that they're going to have to be working on. So we're looking forward to next summer when everything should be completed. And then just quick mention, their Christmas dinner is going to be on December 15th, just prior to the Ohio High Point board meeting. It's a chance for the culinary group to kind of show off to the board members some of their skills that they've learned.
Sounds good. Superintendent's report, Ms. Allen.
We're going to start with Ashley and Kim giving an update. All right, we're going to, you can go ahead and, we're going to give a quick COVID update, and then we were slated to kind of go over demographics last meeting, and because we shifted that meeting time, we pushed that to this meeting, so we'll go over I think one of the questions we were asked is really why we're growing. What are some of the other changes we're seeing in our students and some of the potential barriers they're bringing with them as well. So we'll cover that in our demographics.
So Mark couldn't be here, so you get me tonight, sorry. So next slide. So just a reminder that our focus has always been that we provide in-person instruction for 5 days a week, and it's all based on our local decisions. So according to our dashboard, and this is as of December 3rd, all buildings and departments are reporting no impacts to mild impacts. So our building experience really has been minimal compared to what it was historically. As of December 3rd, there were 12 students and 5 staff cases, and that's obviously going the previous 7 days before that. And then there were 33 students and 0 staff quarantines in that same time frame. So remember this slide, the top is high transmission rate, the little peach is substantial, then we have moderate, and then low. So currently we're in the substantial transmission rate. That is based on the CDC's guidance of 65.7 cases per 100,000 persons in MEVSD. So the CDC thresholds for community transmission are based upon the 7-day average case rate per 100,000 persons. And again, this is as of December 3rd. To date, we have 394 cases for students, and we have 1,131 standard quarantines. And of course, we are still tracking our modified quarantines, and that's at 1,440 for students. For staff, we have 56 cases to date, 21 standard quarantines, and then 69 modified quarantines, with a grand total impact of 3,111 cases and quarantines. Yeah.
Okay, as Diane mentioned, I'm going to give a brief overview of our demographics to show some changes over the past 5 years. And we're paying special attention to some of the variables and influencers that could also be vulnerabilities that impact kids' ability to access their education and thrive at school. So just to give you a brief update on the total enrollment changes, in 2017-18, we had 5,164 students, and to date, we have 5,368, as Jonathan mentioned earlier. And the next slides will go through a few changes over the last 5 years and some of our students who have experience in variables that may impact their learning. This first slide I'll take a moment to explain. We're taking a look at our 4th grade cohort, our current 4th graders on the far right for the 2021-22 school year, and that trends back to when they started in kindergarten. So the darkest shade of gray there on each bar represents students who started with us at the beginning of kindergarten and have stayed with us. And you can see that once kids start, they tend to stay with us. The light gray shade in the middle of the bars there are students who moved into our district each year after the start of school. And then the red shade there represents students who move in and then out again, so that's our transience measure. And you can see that there's a little bit of transience in the K2 space, but that starts to stabilize after 3rd grade. Some trends that I want to bring your attention to on that slide, if you want to go back for me, James, I'm sorry. So kids who start with us stay with us, and we have about 60% persistence rate for a cohort, which is great. The students who come to us after kindergarten place some additional demand on our teachers because they haven't had that stable trajectory through school, and they can come with some deficits that we may have been able to visit earlier in their education. So that does create some more demand. As we know, as kids move schools, they do experience learning gaps at a higher rate. And then the move in and move out transience rate decreases with age. So those are the 3 trends that we wanted to bring to your attention on this particular cohort. This slide talks about students who attend school outside of Marysville but are still considered our residential students. So this includes students who are maybe court-placed in a different educational setting, perhaps placed due to their IEP. They are open enrolled out to other districts, even the preschool experience that isn't inside Marysville but perhaps occurs at Harold Lewis. So these students, there are 361 currently in our district who are receiving their education outside of our typical setting. Okay? There's slight increases over the past 5 years as the graph shows. This slide talks about our students who have socioeconomic needs, and the way that we sort of get a handle on that is to study our free and reduced cost lunch students. So parents have to report that they have a need, a financial need for students to get free and reduced cost lunch. And that has doubled in the last 5 years. So that's a really interesting concern that we need to pay special attention to. Secondly, a variable that we are mindful of is not everybody reports their need. And you know, we heard tonight that sometimes there's an embarrassment to reporting or an unknown protocol to reporting. So this is probably slightly under the actual experience for SES need in our district. Right now, that puts us at about 13%. I'm sorry, I didn't say that earlier. So one influence that students do encounter is if they don't speak English as their primary language, they're considered limited English proficiency. And this slide requires a bit of an explanation. So you can see that over the course of the last 5 years, there's a significant increase in the number of students who have limited English proficiency. I will point back to 2021. Notice that it says 19 students are considered limited English proficient. There were actually 100 students to start the year. And what happens is we have an EL teacher who's phenomenal, and her goal is to help students become more proficient, and one of those measures is to pass an assessment called the OELPA. When students pass the OELPA, they're no longer qualified as EL. So that number goes down over the course of the year because the EL teacher is helping them gain proficiency, but that doesn't remove all barriers, and it doesn't mean that they're totally fluent. So they still can have access issues and needs inside our classrooms. So that's a measure that is continuously fluid, but it does give you an idea of the increase that we're experiencing.
Sorry, Ashley, is that 19 and 44 out of which? Out of the district or out of the? District. Okay.
I would only add to remember, she said we started with 100,
yeah,
right? So that it's important to note the measure that they use is a English proficient measure, if you will, but it certainly wouldn't be what we would consider fluent or conversational even in some cases. Mm-hmm. So that's been if I could or really express one major shift that's, especially in the past year, it would be this subgroup of students that has brought a significant change to our classrooms.
Yeah, where did we start at the beginning of this year? Because I'm a little confused about the 100,
Mm-hmm.
all right? And I get that we started with 100 students and that many of them passed the test and we got down to, is it 19?
19 who were identified last year.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did we start again with a large number at the beginning of this year?
Mm-hmm.
And what was that number?
I don't have that number with me, but I'll get it to the deck.
I believe it was 114.
Okay.
And so there would be multiple attempts to impact that 44. Does that make sense? So it's a rolling measure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think historically, we didn't necessarily archive that original number. So when we went to poll who, was remaining in that category, that's the data we have, but we're going to mark that from here forward, that initial number.
I also, sorry to step in, since this is kind of my world, I also want to mention that we have a significant amount of students move in weekly, right? So this number is seriously very fluid. It just depends on a day-to-day basis, for sure.
Yeah, is there a trend in terms of the language?
Right now, it's Spanish from Venezuela.
And I would say, I think for we have a significant amount this year of students who really who have come to us who speak absolutely no English. So that's been, a larger obstacle. In the past, sometimes there was some English and language acquisition, but this year has been particularly more challenging.
And I would add, I'm guessing that means there's no English at home either. So I mean, that's a big barrier when you can't communicate with the parents.
Correct. As you have noticed, especially if you're on our emergency call list,
Yes.
that we're now offering in our most primary language, like Kim said, Spanish. So all our communications that are urgent communications, and we're shifting to all communications moving forward, are also available in Spanish, which would be a first time for us.
So, and these children are spread K through 12, correct?
They are.
Okay.
Yes.
And we have one teacher?
That's correct.
One teacher for 100 kids. A K to 12. So I'm just reiterating that for the public, I guess. So what services is there a way for the community to support this type of activity and get involved? I think we had a discussion a while back that a particular employer was bringing a lot of people in. There was supposed to be some support coming with that. Did that happen? Does that happen?
Good answer.
Not yet.
Oh.
It's in the process. It's been a request.
Sounds like a good opportunity for partnering, doesn't it?
What's for the Spanish-speaking students, how many are in high school, and how do we leverage, that's a value added for our Spanish language program? Are we able to leverage that for students who are learning Spanish?
Do you mean our teachers who teach Spanish?
No, for instance, it's easier to learn a language when you have someone to communicate with.
Oh, correct,
in their
yes.
language. I'm looking at the value added as well. I understand we need to serve those students, but we can also, especially in high school, we can use those students to, kind of help strengthen our Spanish curriculum, in my opinion. So if we do, that'd be nice to know. If not, then that's something to consider in the future.
So we actually are in the process of that, especially in our 8th grade. They've noticed a large population in that grade level for some reason. So the guidance counselor's already considering some of all of that, for sure.
If we move on to our next slide, this illustrates some increased racial diversity that we have in our schools. So you can see that there's a slight increase each year. We're up to 824 students who are considered non-white or of race. And that accounts for, that accounts for 15%. And last year, we were at 11%. This represents students who are situated in non-traditional families. So that might be students who are living in a situation of kinship, guardianship, foster care, single parenthood, or other more unique situations at home, which often influence how we need to connect with their family and support the child from home to school. There are over an increase of 200 families in a non-traditional living arrangement just this year. If we go on to the next slide, again, I'm going to hit on Kim Jude's world a little bit here, but I'm particularly proud of the work that Kim has done with her department. You can see in 2017-18, there are 1,340 students identified with a disability in which we service them through specially designed instruction with their IEP or perhaps accommodations through their 504. And that has slightly decreased, which takes a considerable amount of work because students who have conditions that do significantly impact their ability to learn. We've tried to be more preventative with them. We've tried to use our personalized learning platform to really meet their needs and be flexible with the structures that they need so their condition isn't as adverse in the classroom. And we try to neutralize that significant impact. And so the teachers are working hard. Tammy and Lynn are two of those people. So this is a good thing for us to keep an eye on as well. Students receiving academic and behavioral interventions in K-6, you can see before COVID we were trending down similar to how our special education numbers were looking. At the point of COVID, we took a significant jump up for obvious reasons. So we'd like to see this continue to return to the trajectory we were on so that students are getting served within the classroom that they belong to. And so you've heard principals say time and time again at their meetings with you, we're getting back to what we know how to do now that we're back to 5 days a week. So that's been a struggle to get back there, and we've seen some increased needs, but we're trying to respond to those and get back to our MTSS model that allows us to know what kids need earlier and provide those needs. Students who are homeless, you can see was on the decline as well and now is back on the rise. So that is a very straightforward graphic there to show you the trend that we're experiencing. And this was one slide that was of particular importance to us. We wondered, of the variables or vulnerabilities that students experience, on average, our students are experiencing under one variable that could impede their access to education. So the question was, what about a child who has one? What is that average for that child? Do they often have more than one factor, or do they just have the experience of one factor? And in answering that question, they're at a greater risk to experience more factors, and that average for students who have at least one is 1.48. So it's just under double what our average is district-wide. And I think that's important to keep in mind. Students who are identified as gifted, you can see in 2017-18, we were at 970. We're now at 667, which brought a lot of question to some of our meetings. And we did need to recognize that the screener changed. Also with our experience through COVID, some of our students who are identified as gifted, as well as other students, were engaging in their education virtually and opted out of in-person testing, and our screeners are done in person. So there are some variables we need to keep an eye on and hopefully address this and continue to stretch kids who are gifted and being identified. This, again, is part of Kim Jude's work. This is an indication of students who need specialized therapy. So this is actually part of their educational plan. OT stands for occupational therapy. It has increased from 86 students to 226, which is incredible. And that's been a real demand on Kim's department. Physical therapy has increased from 37 kids over the past 5 years to 55 kids. And then speech services have been pretty stable. A lot of students receive speech services, and it tends to average right at that 400 point in our district.
Can you give just a couple examples, the difference between occupational therapy and the physical therapy?
I'm sure Kim will have the itch to do that, but yes, we can.
Occupational therapy is fine motor skills, so writing, arm movements, sensory integration, so that's really important and probably part of the reason occupational therapy has gone up given the social-emotional needs, if you want to think of it that way. Physical therapy is gross motor, so running, walking, kicking balls, things like that.
Thank you.
That's the data that we have so far on demographics.
What's the cause of the drastic increase in occupational therapy? Is
You know,
there
I
a
think-
diagnosis linkage or?
Not necessarily. Kim can speak to that more.
Yeah, there's not really a pinpointed reason. I will say sensory integration, so being able to regulate your body, given sensory inputs, lights, sounds, things like that, has increased, and that could or could not be because of COVID, not sure. But other than that, it's just standardized testing that's done through the ETR and IEP process or the evaluation process, and occupational therapists have been identified as a need.
One more question. I may be new and not just privy to this, but how are we screening for gifted students? Because the decrease is pretty drastic, and if we need to adapt how we're screening, then maybe that would make give us a more realistic number.
Yeah, so we have guidance from the state on how we assess for giftedness, and right now we're using what's called the NAT 3, and we can use iReady scores, and previously we were using Terra Nova. So that was the change. There have been actually 2 changes, but Terra Nova was the most recent change. And we can provide some detail on that if you'd like.
I would also say that screener is more rigorous than Terra Nova and View that has historically been used as well. I do think one of the major factors also is the amount of students who did not come in to test, that were actually, their parents had opted for a virtual opportunity, and you could only come in to test, and they would not come in to test during the COVID times.
Any other questions?
I know that when I had an opportunity to go through the buildings, it became very evident that the social and emotional behaviors of the students was putting extra work upon the teachers. And I think, but I just want to clarify, that some of the adverse effects of that ability to sit and to focus and to control yourself, you know, and to work with others and those kinds of things that many of our students, particularly younger students, haven't had for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's at least a portion of what you think is the impact in some of these numbers. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think it's very possible. I mean, we saw an increase in our intervention needs kind of track with the COVID experience. I think that not being in school and not understanding the structure of school was definitely a demand on our teachers, but I also think that stressors have increased in our environment. Families are under more stress for reasons caused by COVID, and so that certainly trickles down to children, even though they may not be aware or have the language to describe that. But I do think that over the past 2 years, families have been experiencing stressors that could be leading kids to not have that regulation that perhaps they have with less stress.
Definitely. Again, the only other thing I was wondering is, you know, looking, like as Nan was bringing up with the languages and stuff, just, I'm sure you're looking at our resources right now and you know, how thin are we stretched, and, you know, I guess what are your thoughts on that area do we have enough resources when you look at these impacts?
I think there are multiple things that we're looking at, and I'm working with teachers pretty regularly around this. Even our ELA teaching cohort has talked about, like, how do we make sure that, you know, we stay true to our full immersion model, but orient students in our students who are adolescents are coming in at a very vulnerable time to feel ill-equipped to then navigate school. And so we're looking at how do we make sure that we're, you know, Mrs. Brown is one person within 10 buildings. So how do we work in structures with our resources that we have to be intentional about that? How do we bring kids together who have similar languages? And I think that's going to be a peer-to-peer support that we can use with already intact structures where it just needs a little more planning and time. We are running some PD. Schools have asked for PD, and Mrs. Brown does have a wealth of knowledge, so she's leading some PD on how to integrate more appropriately with our teachers, because they just haven't had this experience at quite this level. So they're hungry for some guidance, and we're hoping to, you know, create some structures that help.
I'm thinking that maybe some bigger explanation on the gifted numbers might be good, because as a parent, that slide screamed at me, like what's going on? So maybe some article within the Monarch Monthly or something to kind of explain what's going on there.
Great.
I do have, I know you said that the kids who are moving in to the district, there's a gap in their performance. Do we know like where they're moving from? Are they moving from in the state of Ohio, outside of the state of Ohio?
I don't have all the exact data on that, but it's typically in state, and it's within a radius of central Ohio quite often.
Okay.
The second part to your question is sometimes they come in with gaps. I think if you look at the research, when students move schools, they do experience a decline in their educational performance. That's a variety of reasons, and so that's a very natural occurrence that happens when students transition. And so we're often having to wrap around those students with our resources, and so the more transients we experience, the more resources that pulls in.
Have there been anecdotal examples of maybe the gap is like not negative but positive?
In what way? That students have learning.
They're advanced, like.
I think sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes, okay.
Yeah, I just don't think that trend is strong enough.
It's not trending that way,
Correct.
but okay.
Yeah.
And then what's the breakdown of the non-white students? Is that? I mean, if you don't have it now, could you provide that to us later?
Mm-hmm.
And then how are we interacting with the 20 homeless children and their families?
We actually have a person who's in charge of like coordination with the homelessness. So they have direct contact with central office, the admin teams at the schools, their guidance counselors, and they're often, we have partnerships where services are in our buildings, such as maybe a mental health support or a school navigator. And so we try to make sure that we're very intentional about making sure those students are protected and feeling safe. We also transport from wherever they might be so that their education continues without gaps in attendance. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Hey, and I know Diana and I talked about this a little bit this afternoon when we were talking about kids moving in and kind of a shift in your mindset, which I think is important for the whole board to hear this.
So we had done a significant amount of research prior to 2020 about students coming in to the district, and I would say 95% of those students who came to us would be at a deficit compared to Marysville students. Traditionally, we placed you in a class and waited 6 weeks, collected data, and then subjected you to, not subjected, then you went through the MTSS process. That was horrible, sorry. And then you go through the MTSS process for tiered intervention. So our mind shifted prior to that to let's start kids in that intervention. Let's make the assumption, let's embed them in the intervention, and then look for them to work their way out. And we were seeing really some success with that. However, we kind of went through the past couple years and getting back on track, and those numbers in intervention are substantially higher. So we're going to revisit some of that same thinking as we continue to have kids move in and see. That does happen, for example, with a student who might be limited English, for example. It would happen in that case, but maybe for a student who comes on paper kind of looking at a typical experience, that would not happen in that way. So I think we're going to kind of rethink that again.
To add on to that, another thing that we added to our protocols a few years ago was we have certain assessment data that allows us to get a profile on students, such as fluency, comprehension, some basic math skills, especially in our Case 6. And so our instructional coaches will collect some of that data when the emotional time is right. We don't try to meet them at the door with it, but we try to get a feel for, does the student have a significant need, or do we just need to support their transition academically to help sort of be proactive as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mrs. Allen, what else would you like to share in your report?
Just wanted to let everyone know that we did send out a strategic plan update to all the committee members. That included, if they could not attend, kind of a video update from each section of our strategic plan, and also started to do a little summary, I would say, of what we accomplished in session 1. So we'll be reconvening in the beginning of January. So we're prepping for that meeting as we speak. So that's well on its way. And then enrollment-wise, although we've talked quite a bit about enrollment, we are still up 218 kids as compared to this time last year. I would also say that it is December and enrollment is upticking again. That always happens around the end of the year, beginning of the year. So Shannon has had several families in. So we also hosted a job fair, I guess 2 weekends ago, maybe. We had 17 people come to the job fair. One person is beginning a full-time job as a special education aide at Creekview. 8 have applied online to be classified substitutes of some sort, so we're working on getting them through the hiring process. 1 has applied to become a full-time bus driver and is in the interview process, and 1 for the crossing guard position. So I would say it's a pretty good success. Feel good about that. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much. Treasurer's report, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. Well, it's not often I get to present twice in the same meeting, so hopefully you can handle the second adrenaline rush.
We might need to stand up and stretch. I don't know.
So I'm going to be talking about the levy recommendation. You know, we've been talking, especially with the last 5-year forecast, and we've been talking for quite some time about a potential upcoming levy. First off, just discussing the need. Marcus, if you would click on the hyperlink there for forecast summary. First time I've ever used a hyperlink, so showing that I can learn new things. So this is just a quick summary, real high-level summary of the 5-year forecast that I've shown just a month ago. But as you can see there, the 2 main problems we have with the current forecast, that green line shows our ending cash balance. So at the end of the forecast in fiscal year 26, we have a deficit. So that's obviously something that has to be addressed. And the reason for the deficit is we have expenditures exceeding revenues beginning next school year based on projections. So both of those things would, based on our cash balance policy, would indicate that we've got to do something to correct that. So if you go back to the first slide, please, Marcus, thank you. One of the main drivers for the deficit that we're seeing is overall, we're actually starting to see a decrease in total revenue. And the biggest driver behind that, I mean, it's really it's because of state revenue. Our state funding from the foundation or per pupil side has been relatively flat. We're predicting it to stay flat. Obviously, we only can project 2 years at a time based on the biennial budget. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully things change and we start to see increases. But the other thing we just talked about was the tangible personal property reimbursement. Losing $600,000 per year is really driving that revenue down. So when we look at that deficit and how are we going to fix it, you know, we really look at 3 options, and those are the same 3 options that really any school district is going to look at. You have the option of a property tax, schools have the option of an income tax, or you look at budget cuts. Next slide. You know, as we started making this decision, you know, what was our information gathering process? First off, we did a community survey. And that was a survey just randomly done throughout the community. So that would have hit parents, people who are not even really associated with the district in terms of having kids or that kind of thing. So it would have hit just anybody randomly. A couple key results out of there. One thing that I found interesting is applicants were asked what they felt about the taxes that they pay in the district. 48.5% said they felt their taxes were too high. Now, I can't say that's right or wrong, but I would say that we have the third lowest tax rate in Central Ohio. That doesn't mean that they're wrong in answering that their taxes are too high, but that just to me points to the fact that anytime you want to try to pass a levy, regardless of your tax rate, it takes a lot of effort. So it's not going to be easy, because even though we can point and say, you know, we've got one of the lowest tax rates in Central Ohio, people still don't want an increase in taxes, obviously. Nobody likes to pay taxes. Another, obviously one of the main questions we asked on there was how people felt of a property tax versus an income tax. And with that particular survey, I would say it was relatively evenly split, whether they were in favor of property or income. So that for me was an interesting revelation from that survey. We then took that that random survey, and we then emailed that out to everybody in the district. So that would be all parents in the district, and asked them those exact same questions. The one thing that was interesting there and a little different than the random survey was how they felt about the income versus property. So with the parent survey, it was more than double. Parents were more in favor of the property tax versus the income tax. Another community input that we got, we've had finance committee meetings with our 5-year forecast, and we spoke to our finance committee, and mainly we go over those same three options of property versus income versus budget cuts. I would kind of summarize the input we got there, and feel free to jump in, Sue, if you want to add anything else. Was that one, they didn't like the idea of budget cuts. Two, they felt that an income tax would be a good option for the district in terms of what it provides, and I'll get into a little bit of that here in a minute. But they also talked about how it would, most likely be a difficult levy to pass due to certain factors here in the district. And then finally, I would say our most, I guess, intense and time that we spent would be the levy focus groups. We organized levy focus groups, me, myself, obviously, me, Diane, and me, myself, and I, and Kenny Chafin as well was involved. So we all three would meet with these levy focus groups. We selected different, I guess you could say, sectors of the district. So we had a meeting with an agricultural group, with farmers. We had a group that was senior citizens. We had a group that was more business related. We had a group of parents from the various different, like high school, middle school, Creekview, and then elementary. So we really tried to hit all of our bases and spent a lot of time with those groups. So my next slides are going to, I'm going to kind of give you a quicker summary of kind of the things that we presented to them, but what is also valuable for this conversation as well. So first off, we talked about our levy history and specifically new money levies. I didn't go all the way back through history, but I went back to November 1993. There was a new money levy of 8.9 mils, a 5-year levy that was passed. August of 2003, a 5 mil new money levy was passed, and also, again, a 5-year levy. November of 2008, there was a 5 mil replacement and a 4 mil new levy that was passed. And you can see, historically there were a lot of 5-year levies, which led to every time you pass a 5-year levy, 5 years later, obviously you're going to ask for that to be renewed, which can lead to levy fatigue. So you're back to ask for that renewal, plus you're also probably asking for an additional new money levy at somewhere around that same time frame. So something we've done in the last several years is gotten rid of some of those renewals and turned them into continuing levies so that we're not on the ballot as often. You can see in 2013, 2 of those levies were renewed into a single continuing levy. And after the 2018 levy, all of our current levies are actually continuing levies, so we wouldn't be back on the ballot for any renewals. I would mention, and this was just in educating our levy focus groups, that continuing levy growth is limited due to state law. So House Bill 920, as property valuations go up due to inflation, millage is rolled down so that the taxes that an individual pays should be relatively the same. But the growth that we do get is based on typically new construction. And then also we would inform the levy focus groups the timeline that we would be looking at. If we were to go with an income tax, we would likely be on the ballot in 2022, which is why we're having this discussion now. If we were to go with a property tax, we would be on the ballot more likely in 2023.
And can you just give a quick explanation of why the difference in the timing?
I will hit that, yep. So another thing we talked about was how we stretch the levy cycle. So if we go on the ballot in 2022, 2023, that's going to be 15 years between new money levies. So that to me is quite an accomplishment and something that we talked about how did we make that happen. And I just mentioned we had the third lowest tax rate in Central Ohio. One thing that I guess helped stretch the levy that's not a positive thing, but from a financial standpoint it did do that, would be the $2 million cut in staffing based on the failed levy back in fiscal year 13. I would mention that, I don't want to have that happen again, because especially now that we're actually, the enrollment is growing, it would kind of be a double whammy if there were a failed levy. In the last several years, we'd had increases in state foundation funding. There were 2 years in particular where the number went up by over $1 million. So that was a significant increase in our funding. Unfortunately, I think we've hit the end of those increases and could actually start going the other direction potentially. We did have some significant increases in public utility personal property tax. That is tax on basically public utilities, for instance, railroads, AEP, energy generation plants, and specifically that one, there's one up in Raymond that led to an additional $600,000 in 1 year, and that's a continuing revenue. We've effectively used federal grants to help protect our taxpayers, specifically the ESSER revenue that we've received in the last couple of years and still receiving. Back in 2018, we did the no new millage PI levy. So that was not a tax increase to our taxpayers, but it allowed us to shift revenue where we were receiving that revenue. So at that point, we were able to take $1.7 million and add that to the general fund. So that helped us get to this point of pushing back the next levy. And also, we're very strategic in adding new staff. Staffing is our largest cost, so we are, very intentional in when and how we add staff. Next slide. So then we would talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options. Okay, so for the property tax, the advantage of a property tax, it's a very stable source of income. As I just mentioned, because of House Bill 920, if property values were to go down, levy millage would actually roll up. So we would still receive about the same amount of revenue. So that's really one of the most stable type of revenue we could have. It's both residents and businesses pay the property tax, so the property tax, the tax burden is spread out over all of our taxpayers in the district. Disadvantage, obviously, is the limited growth. We don't really see significant revenue growth other than for the new construction. And it's also not reflective of ability to pay. So, for instance, senior citizens or people on fixed incomes are going to, be hit by that tax. The income tax, the advantage there is it tends to have the people that use the school pay the bill. It reduces the burden on fixed income families. So, for instance, senior citizens that are on retirement income or Social Security, that income is not taxed with the type of income tax that we would be looking at is called an earned income tax. And the main advantage from a financial standpoint is the income tax allows for revenue growth. So as the economy grows, as people move in and there's new jobs in the district, that means new revenue for us. And why that's so important is what we've been talking about long-term is trying to avoid becoming a levy cycle district. Like, for instance, a lot of the Central Ohio districts that are growing, you're seeing they're on the ballot every 4 years, give or take, because of that new growth. And if they're have just traditional property taxes, that revenue is not really going up fast enough to keep up with that growth. So that's something we would like to avoid, and an income tax would be one of the main ways that could happen. Disadvantages of an income tax: it's a smaller tax base. Businesses would not pay that income tax. It would only be for people that live in the district. And again, that's not the same as a city income tax where, for instance, somebody lives in Dublin and drives into the district. They would not pay that tax. It's only based on where you live. Another disadvantage, depending on where you fall in this scale, higher income families could potentially pay more compared to a property tax, based on where your income is compared to your property values. With an income tax, we would be on sooner. So the reason we would be looking at a 2022 timeline with an income tax is it takes longer for an income tax to get up to full collection. This is one of the main reasons that we're even looking at an income tax, because a lot of times there's really no window for a district to do an income tax because you need the money sooner than you have a chance. But based on where our 5-year forecast is, and we have a strong balance right now, it actually presented a kind of a one-time window where we could give this a shot and talk about doing an income tax. And then the other, this is kind of an advantage or disadvantage, is that revenue variability. While there's a chance it goes up and we get increased revenue, the economy starts to go south, or a company leaves town, then our revenues would actually go down. And finally, the budget reductions. State law requires that if you show a deficit in your 5-year forecast, that you've got to fix it. I mean, we're fortunate that it's out in the 5th year, so there's the state doesn't come in and do anything, but you don't want it to get to that 1st or 2nd year of the forecast, because then the state comes in and it just gets ugly at that point. Again, these are not, I'm going to talk about here what would be, I guess, what would those cuts look like? This is not a recommendation, or there's no names related to this. These are only numbers, just to, what would the numbers look like to make that deficit go away? Okay, so just purely hypothetical. But based on the deficit that is at the end of the forecast right now, if we started making cuts in fiscal year 23, and obviously in a school district where over 80% of our expenditures are staff, that's where the majority of the cuts would be made. So we would have to cut 5% of our staff, which would be about 30 positions, to get rid of that deficit at the end of the forecast. If we waited until fiscal year 24, we would have to increase that number to 40 positions, or 6.5% of our staff. And the main drawback with the budget reduction method would be, even if we made all of those cuts, which would obviously have an impact on education, we would still be facing a significant deficit in fiscal year 27 and be faced with making these decisions all over again. And again, let me make sure. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the outcomes, what was the outcome, or the feedback we got from our levy focus groups? No one selected the budget cuts option. I think we had some really intelligent people in our focus groups, and I was honestly very surprised at just the school finance knowledge that some of the people had. So it was really, really good to know. One person made the point that, doing budget cuts when the district is growing is, basically, even if you made the budget flat, that's the same as a budget cut. So no one liked that option. The income tax was talked about a lot, and I would say a lot of people saw the value in the income tax in that it would provide that revenue growth. But at the same time, everyone talked about how difficult it would be to pass. When we talked to, one of the main reasons they felt that the income tax would be hard to pass would be the existing income tax burden. So anyone who lives in the city of Marysville is already paying 1.5% income tax, so they felt it would be difficult to convince them to pay even more in a higher income tax. When we talked to our seniors, you know, we felt like that may be the group that would be the most in favor of an income tax based on the Social Security, but they brought up the point that based on the current economy, there are actually a lot of seniors that are actually still working. So they felt like that would be a negative of the income tax. And also, we kind of got feedback from some people that the community is just not really used to income tax when it comes to school taxation. They're more used to a property tax and felt like it's just easier to understand, which is another reason that that would be easier to pass.
I would only add that there was a lot of feedback also about the number of people who worked in Columbus and paid an income tax and lived in Marysville, and there was no credit available, and therefore we heard some very bold statements about staying out of income tax for that reason. So.
Okay, so our recommendation, or my recommendation for the our next levy would be to go with the property tax based on all the feedback we've received. What I would recommend would be a 10-year emergency levy, and I'll talk a little bit why we would want to go with that option. I say 7 to 8 mils. That's partly based on, you know, what our current deficit is, but because that we wouldn't have to be on the ballot until 2023, we've still got time before we have to really drill down on an exact number. I would suggest we would May of 2023 would be our best option. That would also still give us a second chance in November of 2023 if it were to fail. That 7 to 8 mils would generate approximately $6.5 to $7.5 million of revenue annually. The reason that I would recommend going with that 10-year emergency levy as opposed to doing another continuing levy is, again, back to that levy cycle and trying to prevent becoming a levy cycle district. So again, once again, we're presented with kind of a one-time window. Okay, so if we, and I'll get into the 20 mil floor, which we've talked a little bit in the past. By state law, the minimum millage that you can have in your general fund is 20 mils. Okay, just by law, it can't be less than that. Right now in the district, we're at about 23.95, I believe. So we're actually close to the minimum tax that you can pay. The benefit of being on the 20 mil floor is that once you've hit the 20 mil floor and you have inflationary growth on your property values, you actually start to see increased revenue based on that inflationary growth because that millage can't roll down any further. So for instance, if you're at 22 mils and the value of a house, value of our properties go up, that 22 mils would roll down, let's say down to 21 mils. But when you're, like I said, when you're at that 20, property values go up, that 20 mils can't roll down anymore, so we'd actually start to see some growth. So again, that would help us to potentially stay off of that levy cycle because we would start to see some growth. Doesn't mean it would mean we're always off of the ballot because with too much growth we would probably still be on at some points, but it would hopefully stretch the time in between. With a 10-year emergency levy, it also then at that 10-year point you actually could renew it as a substitute continuing levy. So it could then become continuing without actually still counting towards the 20 mil floor. And that's I can't remember how new that is, but that's a relatively new change in law for levy options for schools. And I call that kind of a one-time opportunity because if we were to pass a 7 or 8 mil continuing levy right now, it probably wouldn't be any time in the next 20 years that we'd have an opportunity to hit the 20 mil floor. So right now where we're at, it's kind of a one-time shot. And really, it's really not even a guarantee we would get there because if property values started to tank, our millage would actually roll up and we wouldn't see that. But it's really not really much of a gamble, so to speak, because we're still passing the revenue levy that we would need. So looking at the long-term considerations of the levy, we can't really decisively say right now when the next levy would be, but we will have to communicate to our voters when passing this levy that a lot of that money, even though it's a new tax, like I mentioned, a lot of it is not new revenue because we're losing so much TPP reimbursement revenue that we're likely to be on the ballot again soon. We're looking at, let's just say potentially it could be 4 years, give or take, that they will likely be on the ballot again. Based on that, that's another reason I like that 10-year period where we're not asking for a renewal potentially around the same time that we could need a new levy. A lot of factors could change, so that's just a potential. And also we talked about the potential for a bond issue, and our goal is to avoid that until 2029. And again, those projections are only as good as the data that we have, and those enrollment projections that we have right now. Obviously that could change in the next couple years, but that's still our goal. Those are, I guess, some considerations when looking at levies and looking out and what other levies could be on the horizon. Yeah, I think that's it. If there's any questions.
Excellent presentation, Todd. We talked a little bit about that emergency levy, and I thought you did a great job explaining. I mean, Jermaine, did that make sense to you as somebody who's brand new? It just makes a lot of sense to me. So if we were going to move forward with that property tax, what's the timing on that? Because I know there's that.
If we were to go for May 2023, I don't think we would have to vote until January of 23. So like I said, we've got time. Right. That'll be 2 more 5-year forecasts in between that time. So, right. That'll help us really focus in on where we really need to be.
Okay. And thanks for meeting with all of those different groups too. I think it's helpful to just kind of hear the input from a variety of people. So,
does it seem a little odd or paradoxical that the people that you were working with on these focus groups, they liked the income tax option, but they also said, and it won't pass here? Like, aren't they representative of the community themselves?
Well, I think there was a mix there, and Diane, you can help if you like, but I mean, I think it was a different vibe from different groups. So we had one group that said, I mean, yeah, this makes sense, but I'll vote no in a second. There's no way I would pass another income tax. We had others that said, yeah, well, I like the income tax, and I'd vote for it in a second. I would definitely vote for this, and I'm happy to pay more. I don't know that that's the general voters' idea, but even that person said, but you're going to have a hard time passing it. And I think if you look across the state, the districts that have income tax is typically has a high farming community, and while we obviously do have a certain number of farmers, I don't think I wouldn't say it's a high percentage compared to a lot of the districts that do have an income tax.
I think I would even say our ag group said, well, we think that income tax is the way to go, but we don't think you'll pass it here due to those same nuances. I think and generally speaking, the feedback was we think and understand that that's a way that the district could increase the revenue, right? As incomes go up, so could potentially your revenue go up. So they thought that was a plus. However, it came back to what people were already paying in our community as one of the biggest factors, and the fact that we had so many people working in Columbus and they were already paying 2 income taxes was definitely shared more than once.
And I would also add that the ag group that we met with, I mean, they spoke about the negative impact that a property tax has on them. So that's obviously a consideration we took into account when making this decision. The one gentleman basically said, when you're taxing their farm, it's like putting a tax on their 401k. So obviously that's they would much prefer an income tax.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was mentioned at the finance meeting on the income tax, one of the members was talking about the city of Marysville, and we've got about 25,000 residents of the city. Now, if you subtract children and you subtract senior citizens who do not have earned income, an income tax is levied against about 14,000. Now, the figure that he provided was about 14,000 people. And so as I understand it, what people are looking at is if you work in Columbus and you're paying an income tax to Marysville, you're paying an income tax to Columbus, and then the school district asks you to pay an income tax, you're falling into that smaller percentage of people that are going to be carrying a lot of the financial weight. And in looking at this, the property tax, because industry, the commercial properties and all property is subject to the tax, it falls unfairly on those that have fixed incomes, but generally speaking, it's a broader tax. You have more entities and individuals paying into it. And that has always been something that was attractive to me.
I think we did hear too, I think you talked about that from our senior citizens, they really didn't, there was a comfort level with understanding property tax. They've asked us to come back and follow-up meetings and have small group sessions just for educational purposes. So I think that was a great connect, but there was just concern about, and some, I would say, preconceived assumptions. They thought their pensions would be taxed. So it was a heavy lift, and our concern would be what we put on, we want our best opportunity to pass and not run multiple campaigns. And I think that is a factor in the decision. So if we put something on in 2023 and had to turn around and put something, or 2022, and turn around and put something on in 2023, all of you are well aware of the heavy lift of campaigning, the distraction from our focus on students, staff get nervous. So our goal, quite frankly, is to do it once, if at all possible, and how to best align ourselves in that situation.
I will say that the Ohio General Assembly, that there is a piece of legislation that will kind of, the intent is to inflation-proof the homestead exemption. And it probably won't get done this GA, but for the seniors, that's something to, that would protect them. It wouldn't bring in more additional revenue for us, but for certain veterans, not all veterans, and your senior, there is that. My question is, why 2023? Why not next year when we have, we should have a high voter turnout in the general election next year in the primaries?
So I mean, there is the option. So we could go in 2022 if we wanted to. And if you looked at it so let's take away the budget cuts, let's take away the income tax and just talk property tax. I mean, there are a ton of options when it comes to the property tax. And so when I say, here's my recommendation, there's plenty of chance and time to talk about that and make changes to that recommendation. So if you talked about going in 2022, then you would have to decide, well, when does that collection start? Because you could go in November of 2022 that would be your first chance for a 2024 collection. But you could also go in 2022 for a 2023 collection. The reason I gave that specific time is based on when our deficit is. And I guess that's going to show the most urgent need to our voters, that if we go on 2023, we start collecting in 2024, that specifically hits and corrects that deficit. If we were to go in 2022 to collect in 2023, I think that would be great, because then that would put more time in between levies, but we wouldn't be showing that same urgency, because we would would really literally be going a year sooner than we needed to if we went with the 23 collection. If we went with the 24 collection, then that would just be something we could discuss, the pros and cons of going in November of 23.
So you're kind of referring to that, if you have this large cash balance, it's harder to explain to the community why you're on the ballot for a levy. So, but yeah, I mean, good question.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Obviously, we'll continue discussing that,
Yep.
so. Okay. I've got a short report tonight. Student achievement, I just thought we'd kind of tie in our last building visits that we had on November 30th. And we've talked about this a little bit earlier in the meeting, that we all saw the challenges of reacclimating kids to the structure of a school day, and that maybe it's a little bit more difficult with some of those younger students who maybe hadn't been in school for 2 years. And so things like sharing and lining up, or things that they had either never done or hadn't done for a long time. But we even heard at the high school that older kids are struggling with that transition back to the school routine. I know Nan and I were really impressed with the staff when we visited the buildings. We saw a level of engagement in every classroom that was really impressive. Lots of creativity in how things are being taught. Lots of personalization with students having voice and choice. You go up and talk to them, they know what they're working on, they know why they're working on it. Teachers and administrators are really, they're just working so hard to get our kids caught up. And even when we looked at these slides here and we know that there are losses, we try to let them know, we understand why some of these losses are here, and don't put too much pressure on you. And they're like, yeah, but we really want to get them back in line, so just appreciate their passion for doing that. Also wanted to mention that it was great to see Miss Lewis back at Naven. So we're glad to have her back, and we thank Mrs. McInnes for covering while she was gone. ED 411, it's the annual economic development seminar. It was held virtually this past Friday. I think Nan attended as well. One thing that really stood out to me was just how important it is that education needs to have flexibility so that the curriculum that we're offering matches the skill sets that are needed in the workforce. So obviously our internship programs, all of our partnerships, those things are just critical right now. So I just wanted to shout out on what we're doing here in the district. Finally, just that heads up reminder, our organizational meeting is going to be Monday, January 10th at 5:30 at the board office. That's really it for my report. Legislative, Mr. Smith.
My report is shorter. I mentioned one bill, House Bill 177, that permits school districts to use blockchain technology, which I had no clue what that was. And so my report shows some research to explain what that is, and whether or not that's something significant for our district or not so significant in the short run of things, I have no idea. But I thought we ought to at least be somewhat educated if somebody asks us what blockchain technology is. My work on the College Credit Plus eligibility work group has come to an end. There was a recommendation that is, I hope, is moving forward and should be enacted, and I was able to share a draft of the recommendation with Diane, but she already had it, I think, and also with Brent Johnson's, because I know it had to get out for the planning for next year. I had phone conversations with Representative Richardson and Reneke's office just to highlight some general things. Tried to emphasize school bus safety among the things that we talked about, and I gave you my notes for those two phone calls so that you could see the kinds of things we talked about. And I didn't necessarily talk about all those things with both of those people. But, and I submitted testimony on two bills, Senate Bill 126 and also on House Bill 334. 26 is the one changing the Board of Revisions process for how property is evaluated for tax purposes. And 334 is to take the cap off of the income for what school board members can earn and allow school board members to be paid more money for their service. And you can read what I
It's a little late for that,
submit.
in my case.
Sorry, Brian.
Well, you have to.
Go for it.
If you run again, you would be eligible, so, but that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. For the safety report, I did touch base with Amy, who used to be our person who did that report, and she says that the Youth Free Drug Coalition meets every other month in the morning, and she's going to be giving me Nancy Beal's contact information, and so if you have an interest in serving that role, please let me know. Next, we are to the business section. Yay! I would now accept a motion to approve lots of minutes. We have minutes from our regular November 18th meeting, and then special meetings on November 19th, November 30th, December 1st, December 2nd, and December 6th. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes? Draft minutes.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Smith.
Second.
Second, Ms. Savage. Any comments, corrections? Roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Luke? Yes. Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. I would now accept a motion to approve the resolution regarding House Bill 290.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Luke.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Comments on this? I know Mr. Smith and I talked about this a little bit. It is the backpack bill. Would you like to share anything?
This is a bill, originally it was just a number, just kind of a placeholder. There has not been an amended bill, as far as I know, as of today, but I have a draft of one that is proposed. Essentially, this creates a universal voucher program. Vouchers in our state began to try to address students that were living in school districts that were deficient, and they have gradually expanded over time. This bill would not pose any requirements and would essentially allow any parent to file for a voucher from the state that would be then would direct money for their child's education to any school that they attended.
Including homeschooling?
Including homeschooling. And what it does is it sets up an educational account for each student to pay for their education, their tuition, their books, those kinds of things, expenses that they would have. If they don't spend all of the money in the year in which they receive their first voucher, 50% of whatever remains in their account carries over to the next year. All students K through 8, the voucher would be $5,500, and 9 through 12, the voucher is $7,500. Our school district receives about $4,200 per student. So we're looking at greater funds being allocated to individual students. An organization that's in opposition to this bill has indicated that just to fund those students that are currently going to private schools and those that are homeschooled, if they all ask for vouchers, that would be over $1 billion out of the state coffers. And the way the bill is written, it says that the Department of Education shall approve each application. So doesn't seem to be a way for an application to be turned down. So there's really no criteria. There's no income requirement directly. There's no need to live in a district where you're receiving a deficient education. So you could be a very wealthy family, going to the best schools, maybe already having your children in private school, fill out the application for the voucher, and receive funding directly. There is a constitutional question as to whether vouchers, where you are funding individual students' education, meets the standard for our state constitution. State constitution says that the legislature is responsible for funding a system of common schools. And I would expect that if this bill were to be passed, that there would be some lawsuits filed and a question raised to the Supreme Court over this issue. And I know Diane has been following this also. I think it's important as a board that we advocate for public education. This bill, in talking with our treasurer, would have a significant, or could have a significant impact on our district in terms of income, and the reports that we're getting are not very rosy in terms of our financial future. And this would simply create additional barriers to our community being able to fund a quality education for the children in our district. So I'm recommending to the board that we adopt this resolution.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions or comments?
I'm glad that this resolution is on here. I'm going to vote for it, and the reason is it's hard for me to take this bill as anything else than an attack on public education. It's hard for me to see it in a way that it's not going to impact the resources that we have to carry out our mission, which is to educate every single child. Okay, if you take money and move it from public education into private education, you're taking resources away. We all know that not all kids cost the same to educate. We don't get to pick and choose who comes into our schools like private schools do. We take everybody, and whatever their needs are, whatever those needs are, we meet them, and that takes resources. So as an advocate for public education, I'm completely opposed to this bill, and I'm glad we have a resolution to express that.
I will comment and say that just this year, there was a school named Bishop Sycamore, was on an ESPN game, and was blown out 58-0. Turns out that this school was really non-existent. It is a legit charter school, but there's no building, nothing you can find. The coaches, I mean, they're supposed to be high school age, and they're playing a high school game. They played a game on Friday and played another one on Sunday the same weekend. That just happened this football season. So that's just one example. Now, I have friends, especially in the Central Ohio region, that have benefited from some form of school choice. And you know, I understand the opposing side, but it didn't work in the Kasich administration when we took almost over $1 billion out of public education to fund charter schools. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. We need to support public education. We don't take funding away from school districts that are underperforming. That's not the solution. And I support this resolution, and thank you for adding it to the agenda. And we should be uniform in our support.
Yeah, Jermaine raises the question of accountability, and private schools are not accountable in terms of curriculum. They are not accountable in terms of their finances, and our treasurer gets audited frequently, and we get shining results. Our academic programs are audited on a regular basis in order to make sure that we're providing quality education. And I firmly believe that when taxpayer dollars are used, you have to have a chain of accountability that follows those tax dollars. And this bill cuts those strings, cuts that oversight. And I think, again, it's an assault on education, as Brian has said.
Well said. I think it's coming through loud and clear. We strongly support this resolution. How about a roll call?
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. I would now accept a motion to approve the treasurer CFO action items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second.
second by Mr. Ferguson. Todd, any comments?
Mostly it's your general items that you'll see each month. I would note on the cash flow, on the revenue side, our foundation revenue, we're still waiting to see what the new foundation funding formula is going to look like, but it should be in January. So we'll finally see that. And on the payroll side, I think you're going to start seeing the payroll trending over budget with the rate increases that we've had to implement based on the worker shortage. And then also you just saw with the specialized services, the number of students increasing and the staffing that is involved in handling that.
Okay. I did also notice we have some very nice donations on there as well for the stadium project, wrestling, and robotics. So thanks to all of those who donate to those programs. Any questions or comments? Roll call.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And then finally, I would accept a motion to approve the superintendent items.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Ms. Savage. Diane?
You can definitely see we have some new hires coming in to replace positions. Also, I would highlight that we have quite a section of retirements. Collectively, that the list of retirements represents over 80 years of service to our district. So definitely want to thank Bill and Nancy and Susie and Pam Felix. Certainly when we're talking about OT, Pam has really made a significant impact on that trajectory. So thank all of them for their time and service and everything they've done for our community and students. Other than that, we have volunteers and subs as well as the OPSI agreement. I know Sue served on that group, and it's taken a while to get the signatures we need, but those are on there as well. And we have student teachers also that will be serving the district, Naven and Creekview.
I do believe I saw Chloe Powers on there. Amy's granddaughter, I think, is one of the interns, which is nice. And just kind of going back to that MOU with OPSI, I know not everyone on the board is privy to negotiations issues, I guess, but I think we've just had a great relationship over the years, and we really haven't had that traditional negotiation for quite a while. So it's really just kind of a nice sit down, have a conversation, let's talk about some issues and find creative ways to work through them. And this was just pretty much language and a couple of procedural type things.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the retirements. I had the pleasure to know and work with a number of those that are retiring, and the service that they've given to this district and the students is just absolutely amazing. And so want to wish them well as they get to enjoy, hopefully, a little bit of time off. I also wanted to comment on the Global Scholars Diploma Stipend. We've got 3 excellent teachers that are stepping up to guide this program, and I think that as we move forward as a school district, that this Global Scholars Program is going to expand, and we're going to see more and more students get engaged in that. It can pay huge dividends, becoming more aware of the world in which we live in and being more aware of the different cultures and different ways that people communicate and act and interact with one another. So very excited about that program.
Any other comments? I second your comments about the retirees. I mean, what an amazing group of employees. We're going to have some big shoes to fill, but I have confidence we'll find a way to fill them. If there are no other questions or comments, roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And now, comments and questions from board members. Mr. Smith?
This has to qualify, I think, as the longest board meeting we've had in a long while. But I think all of the presentations tonight were important, and I think of all the board meetings we've had, we've never gotten the volume of very important, very significant information to us. So thank you to all the administrators that were involved, our treasurer and our superintendent for excellence in those presentations. Thank you to Bunsold for hosting us tonight. I appreciate, and I want to comment on the comments that were made to us. I appreciate all of those comments and want people to know that I recognize the significance and importance of the Hope Center. Their mission and what they do is vital to our community. I also want to mention that Bill Keck is here, and he and I enjoyed each other's company as we toured all the school buildings, and we saw some of the happiest kids and some of the happiest teachers that I've seen in a long time.
Thank you. Ms. Savage?
I'd like to ditto everything that Mr. Smith said. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Bunsold for hosting and all the presenters. I, again, wanted to say thank you to all the people that spoke at public participation and let them know that I appreciate what they're speaking about, and I appreciate the mission of the Hope Center, and I'm hoping we can work to find some sort of solution. Sue and I had a great time touring the school buildings, and I was happy to see all of the kids so engaged and looked very happy. Everyone really looked very happy. I just had a couple of things I wanted to kind of call out. Excuse me. Raymond just did a Door Dutchman fundraiser and raised $2,200. And they're also sponsoring Christmas families. Northwoods created cards for Children's Hospital, and they've adopted families for Christmas. And this week is actually Grinch Week at Northwoods. Navin collected 565 boxes of cereal for the Marysville Food Pantry. Mill Valley is planning the Holiday Jubilee, and the Leo Club from the high school has volunteered to work in their Santa workshop, and they are also adopting families. Edgewood did a Humane Society fundraiser. Creekview did Shop with a Cop, Blessings in a Backpack, and partnered with the Elks Lodge to sponsor families within the community. Early College High School has a new dyno machine, which is a wonderful tool for our auto program. And they collected 3,600 items for Blessings in a Backpack. and are planning a STEAM night for January 7th. And one of the things I noticed when we were at Marysville High School, the student organizations that the students themselves are putting together to be supportive of each other really speaks highly of our community.
Thank you. Mr. Luke? Should
Well,
I save you to last? I don't know. Okay.
I'm fine. I do want to say to Mr. Keck and Mr. Ferguson, this was an unusually long meeting.
Yes.
Don't get the wrong idea. It was a very good meeting, though. But I wanted to comment on my service as a whole. It's actually not as hard to leave after 8 years, because I know that the board and the district is in very good hands with our superintendent, with our treasurer, with our current board members, with our new board members, Mr. Keck and Mr. Ferguson, and with our board president, Sue. I know the district is in very good hands. And I will say that in our interviews, we asked people the biggest challenge, and the most common answer was growth. I don't actually agree with that. I think that growth is coming, and this district is on top of it. Our administration is on top of it, and it's going to be handled. I think the biggest challenge is trust. And so I'm going to wish you well, and I'm going to keep working on helping to build trust between the community and the schools, in my private capacity. And lastly, I just wanted to share the two things that I learned from these 8 years that I'm going to take with me. When I started in this position, I came on as an advocate for teachers. I came in right after the RIF, and I ran because I was upset about the RIF, like many of us in the community. And I come from a family of educators. I'm an educator myself. What I learned over the last 8 years was teachers are even more skilled, accomplished, talented, dedicated than I even knew. They're more professional than I knew. I'm so impressed with the teachers in this district. And the other thing I learned, which I didn't expect, was how important the administrators are. That was a big lesson for me over 8 years, that it's the quality of the administrators that also makes this district work. That was lesson number one. Lesson number two, and I'd like to share this with everybody. Over the entire 8 years I've been on the board, we never once brought politics into our discussions. Never once. Think about that. I'm proud of that. And I learned something from that. We were able to work together on very important issues like education without bringing politics in. So in an age of division, that's a lesson. And I think if we can do it at the local level, if we can work together without even bringing up our political identities, if we can do it here locally, I believe we can do it nationally. I know it's a challenge, but that's one of the lessons I took from this, and I'm going to continue to share that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Luke. Mr. Ferguson.
Well, I just want to use this opportunity to thank the board for the appointment to serve alongside each and every one of you. I hope I prove worthy of this appointment, and I'm committed and dedicated to serving our teachers, our parents, and educators, administrators. And when I look at decisions that we make here, I'm looking at the decades that come ahead. And no decision we should make should be, oh, this is going to help us the next 2 weeks or 6 months, but this will position us in a stronger position the next decade for this, for our students. I'm reminded of an author, Hellrinkle. He drove by in Texas during spring, and he saw Christmas tree seedlings. The next, few months later, there are trees. And he wondered, he said, you know what? They didn't name their farm Christmas tree seedling. It was a Christmas tree farm. And he was relaying that concept to how we look at kids. A lot of times, society says we're raising kids, but we're not. We're raising adults. And so everything that we do in this district, we're setting the environment to raise productive adults that are going to compete in the modern economy and be assets to our society. And that's my point of view, and that's hopefully what I can add to this board. So thank you for the opportunity to serve alongside of you. I look forward to, I agree, we need to rebuild trust with our parents, and I hope I can be an asset in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Dick, thanks for the education on blockchain. I read your report. I knew nothing about it until that. Brian, thanks again. I appreciate your collaboration over the years and your unique perspective that you were, always willing to share. And Jermaine, welcome to the board. Looking forward to working with you.
Diane.
I would say the same, Mr. Luke. I'll miss our conversations and your perspective and really kind of pushing me sometimes to think about things from a different angle. So while you had lots of lessons learned in your time in the board, I do believe that I was able to grow and learn with you and because of your leadership. So thank you for that. Mr. Ferguson, I apologize for the longest board meeting ever, but I am excited to work with you and certainly, better the situation for our kids moving forward and looking into our forecast. Otherwise, I would wish everyone the happiest holiday season. I can tell you, generally speaking, while I will never speak for the teachers, I know and staff, there was a great sigh of relief with the adjustment to the calendar that all of you made, so I wanted to share in their appreciation for that. They were very excited. And remind everyone at our January board meeting, we do have potential for it to be a little bit longer, but we will be celebrating kind of that fall season accomplishments and state qualifiers. So that is on the horizon, not for the organizational meeting, but for the regular meeting.
Okay. I also want to thank our public participation speakers. I hope they know that we do hear their comments and we do take them into consideration as we oversee the work of the district and future plans. Also want to thank our presenters tonight. I don't know if anyone had a chance to go to the Bunsold musical, Elf, but I was there on Friday night and it was amazing. Mr. Langhouse's son was Buddy, but they just do such a great job and it looks like they're having so much fun. That's what I really love about it. As for the appointment process, I just kind of wanted to go back to that. We had 11 applications with incredibly impressive skills. I also want to point out that 3 of the applicants were Marysville grads. I thought how exciting to have, graduates applying as well. It was really challenging, but how lucky are we to have had so many well-qualified applicants, and we sincerely hope that they're going to stay involved in some capacity. I wanted to shout out Raymond. They also had a animal project right before Thanksgiving, and I was able to stop out there. The students loved the project. They got to pick an animal, create a display however they wanted to. The variety was incredible, and again, they were just excited to share with us and to check out their classmates' projects as well. Nan, you pointed out a lot of the giving going on in our district, building love at every building. I just think that's so heartwarming, whether it's providing the Thanksgiving meals to families in need, rounding up coats and hats and mittens, supporting many of our community charities. So I thank the staff, students, and families, and also there were a lot of businesses listed there as well who are partnering with our district to help support in so many different ways. We just can't thank them enough. Jermaine, we're so excited to have you join the board. I know we're going to be working closely with you and Bill to try and get you up to speed as fast as we can. Please don't ever be afraid to reach out, ask questions. Brian, thank you again for your service. It's just been a joy working with you, getting to know you, and I just really appreciate what you brought to the board. So. And I also wish everybody a very blessed holiday season and a happy New Year 2022. So with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Roll call.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:39. Thank you.